across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. There is breaking news from Manchester, and that is that Mohammed Fahir Ammaz, who is 20, has been found guilty at Liverpool Crown Court of assaulting 2 female police officers at Manchester Airport last July. The jury has been out for nearly 2 days. That verdict has come through. The guilty verdict has come through for Mohammed Fahir Ammaz, the 20-year-old who's been found guilty at Liverpool Crown Court of assaulting 2 female police officers at Manchester Airport last July. We're still waiting for the verdict in regard to his brother. We know that that has been an incredibly controversial incident. Now we have at least one guilty verdict. We'll see what happens in the other case. The jury of 12, one of them was excused because of a pre-existing holiday. We know as well that the judge earlier on today said that there were 11 jurors left, of course, and that he would take a majority verdict of 10. So 10 out of 11. We don't know how many of those people agreed that there should be a majority verdict. But the breaking news today, and Peter Blexley is on his way into this studio in the next few minutes. Our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police detective, will get his instant reaction to that. He's just getting a microphone put on him at this moment because he was due to be on with us a little bit later on, but we're of course bringing him right to the top of the programme because the breaking news today at 4:04 is that Mohammed Fahir Ammaz, who is 20, has been found guilty at Liverpool Crown Court of assaulting 2 female police officers at Manchester Airport last July. We remember that footage, shocking footage. There was a police officer who was accused, firstly, of kicking one of the accused in the head. We now know as well that, or we later knew because there was footage that emerged after that of the fact that, what Mohammed Fahir Ammaz has been convicted of, found guilty at Liverpool Crown Court of assaulting 2 female police officers. One of them had her nose broken. Well, Peter Blexley is with me now. He is our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police detective. Peter, thanks for coming in early on this. Tell me your instant reaction to the fact that one of these men, anyway, we don't know about the other verdict yet. It will come through presumably soon. But Mohammed Fahir Ammaz, the 20-year-old, has been found guilty of assaulting 2 female police officers at Manchester Airport.
Thus far, I am unashamedly delighted. Police officers in this country are assaulted in record numbers every day of the week. They need the protection of the courts. They need protection from their senior officers. They need protection from Parliament by ensuring that the right legislation with the right punishments is there to be handed down when people are arrested, charged and convicted like this man has been on 2 counts today.
I know we're going to stay on the right side of the law because the other verdict hasn't come through. The last thing we want to do is prejudice a trial. We want to be really careful here, and I know you will be, Peter, because this ain't your first rodeo. In terms of the public reaction to the fact that Mohammed Fahir Ammaz has been found guilty here, has been convicted, what will he perhaps look at for that assault conviction? Of course, it's up to the judge in terms of the sentencing in regard to that. And what do you think the public reaction will be?
I think the public overwhelmingly will share my standpoint, which is that we are very pleased that thus far 2 guilty verdicts have been returned. Clearly others to be considered and other verdicts to be returned. Let's rewind, if we may, to last year, to the 23rd of July, when there was a short snippet of video released and the nation, or many people, were outraged by what they saw. And then a few days later, actually, we saw a much longer clip of events.
We weren't given the full context, were we, originally?
We weren't. And this is really a lesson, I think, for everybody. And please forgive me, audience, if I sound a little bit preachy here. But when you see a snippet of particularly police behaviour, and I'm talking very much now in generic terms on social media, and people suddenly rush to judgment about it, I would always exercise caution about that, and I do, because it can sometimes be extremely helpful to know what happened throughout the entirety of an event. What was the background? were any offences, for example, committed before that person came upon a situation whereby a police officer is engaging with a member of the public and they just started filming then. So they present only really a snapshot of a situation, not the full context, not the full explanation, not all of the evidence. So I would urge people in future, when they see that snippet of police action, and please don't think, and you and I'm sure your audience will appreciate, I never defend the indefensible.
Of course. And if someone was kicking someone in the head, that is something that cannot be condoned, nor would you ever condone that, Peter. And what we know, though, is that there is context to this. There was a fight in which Mohammed Fahir Amaz was involved, and we know that he has been found guilty by at least 10 jurors, if not 11, at Liverpool Crown Court of assaulting 2 female police officers, one of whom had her nose broken.
Yes, and who knows, possible lifetime disfigurement, although I sincerely hope that in this day of advanced surgery, cosmetic surgery and the such like, that she may be able to be restored to her the previous way that she looked. But either way, a hugely distressing thing for anybody to be subjected to. In that particular example, a vicious, wicked, utterly unnecessary assault on a woman police officer, for which he has been rightfully convicted, and I make no bones about reiterating I am extremely pleased with these 2 verdicts.
Well, thank you, Peter, for that. We are awaiting the verdicts on other charges, and we're not going to speculate or talk about that in any way before that happens. We expect that will happen during the course of this programme. It may be tomorrow, but for now, the breaking news in the last 10 minutes is that Mohammed Fahir Amaz, who is 20, has been found guilty at Liverpool Crown Court of assaulting 2 female police officers at Manchester Airport last July. We will, of course, bring you any further verdicts, any further news or updated lines on that as the programme goes on. Peter, we were due to speak to you a little bit later on. Thank you for coming directly into the studio. What we know as well is another bit of breaking news which is just coming through to us right now, that Palestine Action's co-founder Huda Amori has lost a fresh bid for a temporary pause of the ban on the group as a terrorist organisation at the High Court. There's been action earlier on today saying they could bring that forward, but the co-founder Huda Amori losing a fresh bid for a temporary pause of the ban on the group as a terrorist organisation at the High Court. I'm just getting a reaction to this. You're just hearing about this, Peter, but what is your instant reaction?
Our democratic parliament has spoken, and a couple of weeks ago they prescribed Palestine Action. In other words, they made it illegal to support that organisation, to be a member of it, or to in any way, shape or form promote its aims. And that was the voice of Parliament. They put it onto the statute book. It became law. Palestine Action have tried to challenge that today, and it would appear that this decision has gone against them. So it still remains the same. Support of Palestine Action in any way, shape or form is a criminal offence.
Let's talk about what we asked you to come on to talk about. I know that Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, has been speaking to the media this morning on this story in regard to what Peter Kyle, the Technology Secretary, said yesterday in regard to Nigel Farage. He said that if you are against or question the Online Safety Act, that you're on the side of predators such as Jimmy Savile. This is what Heidi Alexander said earlier on today.
A situation where Nigel Farage and Reform are saying that they will repeal the Online Safety Act in its entirety. And I think Peter was rightly making the point that actually, you know, the likes of Jimmy Savile, when they were committing those heinous crimes decades ago, if social media had been around at that point in time, don't kid yourself, the likes of Jimmy Savile would have been online seeking to get access to children in the way that the Online Safety Act now is seeking to prevent. And so I think that was the point that Peter was making.
It's interesting as well that Nigel Farage spoke yesterday. He said that he thought this was completely unfair. He actually thought it was beneath and below the belt for Peter Cardwell to say this. Peter Blexley, what do you make of this row? Because the government is doubling down on this. Heidi Alexander there, the Transport Secretary, saying that Jimmy Savile would have targeted children online today, and to be against the Online Safety Act is to be on the side of the predators. What do you think?
This lamentable Labour government is just about the worst government I've ever experienced at its communications, and some other things. They repeatedly get it wrong, time after time after time. I don't know who advises them on their comms or what to say, but this showed a huge understanding, really, of the offending of Jimmy Savile. Because what they were saying was, if you stared into a crystal ball and he was still alive, for example, he would offend online. Jimmy Savile's offending, that vile, repulsive, predatory, repeat sex offender, got away with his crimes because he had access. He was granted access to children and to people with disabilities and people in hospitals and the deceased, of course. He had access, granted access on BBC premises, granted access in hospitals, in mortuaries and the such like. And predatory paedophiles, like the revolting Savile, are all about manoeuvring themselves into positions so that they can get access to people that they will then turn into victims. Now, if Savile were alive today, and let's all say hurrah because he's not, would he satisfy his paedophilic urges by sourcing content online? In other words, images of child sex abuse? Possibly, but Savile had so much access to real human beings that I think to use him as an example in this situation was really clumsy in the extreme, and to draw that comparison and lay that accusation at Nigel Farage's feet, I think, was a huge sign of dreadful communication judgment.
It's just cheap as well to simply say that you disagree with me, therefore you're like Jimmy Savile. It's a bit like people who say you disagree with me, therefore you're like the Nazis. I mean, it is just something that is so extreme. It's going to the extreme of an argument really quickly. It is losing the argument, I think, by saying that. And actually, there is a debate to be had about the Online Safety Act. A lot of people are dealing with the consequences of its implementation over the last few days. Quite a number of people who know very little about the law, who know very little about politics, are simply saying, right, well, there's certain things I can't see online. There are speeches by Conservative MPs on rape gangs, for example. Katie Lamb, the Shadow Home Office Minister, had a speech about that. That was blocked due to the Online Safety Act on Twitter and other platforms. There is a debate to be had. There is a conversation to be had. And in attempting to shut down that conversation and simply saying, well, if you disagree with this, you're like Jimmy Savile, well, that is a reductive argument. And it is, I think it's beneath someone like Peter Cardwell, who I've interviewed before. He's an intelligent man. And to go to these extremes, I think, is actually really disappointing.
Yeah, it's poor in the extreme. And it's also very authoritarian to try and shut down debate about laws that have been passed in this country, which is, of course, supposed to be a flagship democracy with freedom of speech. Let me just mention, if I may, the Katie Lamb speech that she made in Parliament, which was extremely powerful, reached a huge audience, so many of whom absolutely chimed with every word she said. It is actually the social media platform X that have chosen to take that down because they harbour concerns that it may fall within the Online Safety Bill, and that element of the bill now, of course, it is down to Ofcom to enforce that. Now, knowing that I was coming on your show this afternoon, I decided to see how these changes had been made. So within the comfort of my home, I tried to access a porn site for research purposes only, I claim.
All right.
Right? Because I really wanted to know how this works, because all week I've been seeing people expressing their concerns about it, about the online bill, whereas I express concerns about children accessing pornography.
Yes.
That's my standpoint predominantly. So what I will say is, and this is one of the huge online pornography websites that I tried to access. Yes, there was a verification process that you had to go through in order to access the content. There were different ways that you could be verified. I chose the method which meant I had to enter my email address, and then it takes me to a third-party site. So not the pornography website, but another third party who have clearly been engaged by the pornography website to do the verification.
Okay.
Now that for me raises concerns. How secure is this third party website who are now going to collect my data? Would they be subject to a hack, for example?
Yes.
Could people thereafter be blackmailed by hackers saying, we know you use this party for verification as you aimed to get onto a website, we're now going to blackmail you. So my concerns were around this third party site into whom I had to put my details. I actually went down the credit card route. You can use that.
Okay.
You enter your credit card number and the number on the back of the card. Again, more security concerns, as you can imagine, that I've got. Are they secure? Is that data impenetrable? Or will somebody be able to hack in and then come and blackmail me and or others?
Peter, we're just getting a bit more detail on what has happened at Liverpool Crown Court. This is the breaking news in the last 20 minutes that Mohammed Fahir Amaz, who's 20, has been found guilty of assaulting 2 female police officers at Manchester Airport last July. Fahir Amaz himself, Mohammed Fahir Amaz, was convicted of the assault of PC Lydia Ward, causing actual bodily harm, and the assault of emergency worker PC Ellie Cook. He was also found guilty of an earlier assault of a member of the public, Abdul Karim Ismail, at the airport. A jury at Liverpool Crown Court was unable to reach verdicts on allegations that Amaz and his brother Mohammed Ahmed, 26, assaulted PC Zachary Morrison, causing actual bodily harm. Well, Mohammed Ahmad, who's 26, denied a single charge, namely that he assaulted PC Morrison. Jurors were unable to reach the verdict on that charge in relation to both Mr Ahmad and his brother. On behalf of the prosecution, the barrister from the Crown Prosecution Service said they would need time to decide whether there could be a retrial on that count, on count 2 of that. So what we know is that one man has been found guilty of assault of police officers, both the police constable Lydia Ward, causing actual bodily harm, and the assault of emergency worker PC Ellie Cook. So all the details come out that his brother has not been convicted because the jury has been unable to reach a verdict on that. Now we have more details on that. Peter, tell us your thoughts on that.
Yes, well, what will happen now is that the court will adjourn for the day. The barristers will meet with the CPS and the officer leading the case, and they will sit down and together, primarily the CPS, they will have ultimately to come to a decision as to whether to seek a retrial on the one count against Amaz's brother, because he was charged with one assault only, and the outstanding assault against Fahaz, upon which the juries could not decide on verdicts.
Yes.
It's what's known as a hung jury, in that regard. So the CPS will take their time, although I expect a decision before the end of the week as to whether they will seek a retrial on the 2 outstanding counts, one against each brother.
Okay. Peter, thank you very, very much indeed for all of that. Lots of reaction coming into the building. We'll certainly talk about this more as the show goes on between now and 7 o'clock. For the minute, Peter Blexley, former Metropolitan Police Detective, our crime commentator here at Talk, author, speaker, and indeed he has a tour coming up in the next few months. Do check that out online. Lots to discuss here on Talk between now and 7 o'clock. We'll talk about the recognition of Palestine as well. Stay with us here on Talk.
I think one of the difficulties is that engagement as it goes on now tends to be with so-called community leaders, and I'm not quite sure how community leaders get appointed or elected or emerge. Perhaps they just emerge in the form of the old leaders of the Tory party in the 60s. I don't know, but they seem to have a focus on things that actually don't really matter all that much to people who are losing their phones and losing their cars and losing things from their home when they're burgled.
Yeah, exactly right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much for your company this Wednesday afternoon. There's some breaking news, and that is that all flights have been grounded in all London airports. They've been suspended due to a radar failure. We will talk to a travel expert as soon as we can get one of them on the air, but that is the breaking news, that all flights at London airports have been suspended due to a radar failure. There will be obvious questions about how on earth this happened. There'll be plenty of questions as well about cyber attacks. Maybe it is human error. Oh, it's all right. It's all across the UK. Sorry, I've just been told in my ear. All flights are now grounded right across the UK at every airport because of this radar failure. We will bring you one of our travel experts as soon as we can on that topic, but that is the breaking news. If you're travelling to an airport, you're going to pick someone up from an airport, whatever is happening in regard to your travel, whether it is in the next few hours, you'll want to know that all flights at all airports right across the country have been suspended due to the failure of the radar system in this country. It'll be very interesting to see what has happened in other parts of Europe as well. Plenty to discuss in all of this. We will try and get a travel correspondent as soon as possible to give us instant reaction. In the meantime, another huge story, one that I thought would dominate this programme, and already we have two other huge stories that we're talking about. That is the breaking news that, of course, Mohammed Fahir Amaz, who's 20, has been found guilty of assaulting two police officers after the Manchester airport attack last July. We'll bring you more on that as time goes on. But what I want to talk about now is Hamas, the terrorist organisation in Gaza, saying that recognising Palestine is a victory. Jonathan Sacerdoti, the journalist and broadcaster. Jonathan, you've been very patient with us. I know we've kept you waiting for 20 minutes, and I do apologise for that. I know you'll appreciate, as a journalist yourself, that sometimes breaking news has to be attended to. But in regard to these issues, in regard to the fact that Palestine is to be recognised as a state by the United Kingdom, what's your reaction in terms of the fallout from that over the last 24 hours?
Well, I tend to agree with the Israeli position that it's a ridiculous proposal that Britain under Keir Starmer has come up with. I think, if anything, Palestinian statehood being recognised ought to be conditional not on the actions of the State of Israel, but on the actions of the Palestinians. And I think, to that end, we can't forget what happened on October the 7th, but also for decades before then, through countless acts of terrorism which have taken so many lives, being blown up in buses, in pizzerias, in nightclubs, stabbings, rammings, and the list goes on. So I think that the idea of Keir Starmer using recognition of statehood, of Palestinian statehood, as a punishment for Israel is a preposterous idea that doesn't just fly in the face of common sense with Israel, but also flies in the face of common sense with the whole idea of what statehood and sovereignty is. I just don't think it should be used in that way. And I think that he's doing this in order to satisfy or placate or appease the very worst parts of the British electorate, and indeed parts of the Parliamentary Labour Party. And again, I think that's going to go very badly for him in the future. So overall, I think it encourages and rewards terrorism. I think that will be seen by terrorists around the world and around the Middle East. And I think it encourages and rewards some of the worst parts of his constituencies, his voters, and indeed of his own MPs.
we're in a situation, Jonathan, where Israel has condemned this, where, as you would expect them to, the Americans have condemned this. Do you see greater fissures emerging between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump? It was, of course, only Monday where the two men had a rather large in-person discussion on many, many issues, and then the next day we're told that there's to be a recognising of Palestine. We also have the conditions that are put on this by Keir Starmer. I mean, my thought would be, I disagree with it in principle, as you can imagine I do, but my thought would be, if you really believe this should happen, just do it. Why would you put conditions on Israel or anybody? Why not just do it if you think it's the right thing to do?
Well, more than that, the conditions he put on it are really weird, because he says that he wants these conditions there in order to try to push things forwards for making some kind of imaginary, peaceful two-state solution between the two parties. Now, that's obviously quite a peculiar response to October the 7th, 2023, and the month since then, because I think that was probably the moment most Israelis realised the fantasy of a two-state solution was one that they'd nurtured only amongst themselves. After all, the Palestinians, under pretty much every possibility they were offered for having a state, have turned it down. And then that culminated in this hideous act of terrorism and barbarism on the 7th of October. So even putting that aside, he says that he wants a ceasefire in the current war that's going on in Gaza. And so if Israel can't achieve a ceasefire by September, he's going to recognise Palestinian statehood. But Israel's already agreed to the ceasefire agreements brokered by Egypt, Qatar and the US. It's Hamas that hasn't agreed to them. So now he's incentivised Hamas.
There is absolutely no incentive for Hamas to have any sort of ceasefire in regard to this British action.
That's exactly right, because he said, come September, if there's no ceasefire in place, I'm going to give you a recognition of statehood. So the Palestinians are laughing. You've got Hamas saying, OK, we're going to keep torturing and probably killing and starving these 20 hostages who are still alive that they seized. I mean, just think of the brutality of their treatment for so long, almost 2 years being kept hostage. Then they're going to simply just dig their heels in. It's going to slow down or stop any negotiations for a ceasefire, because the reward for that on the part of Britain will be recognition of a Palestinian state, which will then strengthen and embolden Hamas. Because even in the rotten mainstream political system of the Palestinians, the so-called moderates aren't that great either. But Hamas are going to be the ones who can turn to the Palestinian street and say, well, we achieved this, and we achieved it through violence and terrorism and rejectionism. So I think that all round, it's such a bizarre and daft policy that it's hard to believe that even this government is so stupid that it actually thinks it would work. So one can't help but think that's not really the true reasoning behind it, and they just
I think you're right, Jonathan. I think we're right to be cynical about this. I think this is a lot more to do with the rebellion over the welfare bill than it is to do with anything that has happened in the Middle East. I also wonder, I mean, I'm reluctant to even read out these statistics because they are from Hamas terrorists, but we are told by the Hamas-run health ministry, which is, of course, Hamas terrorists are telling us this, so we always have to be really cautious about any statistics they tell us. They allege that 104 people have been killed in the last 24 hours. They talk about 7 more deaths from malnutrition. What is absolutely clear is that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I don't think anybody can in all honesty, deny that. But how does this in any way help those people? That's my question, because Keir Starmer, to me, is doing something that's performative rather than something that actually goes to the heart of this issue, which is to deal with the humanitarian crisis, to bring peace to the region, and to make sure that Hamas have absolutely nothing to do with those people's lives in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really complex one to do briefly, but the point is that aid getting into the Gaza Strip is a really difficult challenge. In the past, it's been administered by UN bodies, other aid bodies in the Strip, but they've been infiltrated and corrupted by Hamas and other terrorist groups who have stolen the aid, sold it when it was meant to be free, and then used that money to blackmail or pay people to continue being Hamas fighters and also to continue generally being part of the Hamas machine. So know, the Israelis and the Americans tried to replace that system with this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which has come under a lot of criticism for its shortcomings, but it has been trying to break that stranglehold of Hamas. And so in recent days, we have seen these images coming out of Gaza and these statistics that you mentioned. We have absolutely no way of knowing how accurate they are, only to say that they are coming from Hamas-controlled bodies. And so they are almost certainly exaggerated, and they are almost certainly lies in certain parts. But of course, there is bound to be some form of suffering and shortage after so much time in the Gaza Strip of war, especially when Hamas still has this hold on power. And Hamas is ruthless. It will sacrifice its own people. I mean, if it came to it, I'm sure that Hamas probably would starve children simply to be able to make sure the world could see starving children, even if there's enough food there.
Well, they are very happy for the deaths of their own people, or maybe they're not even their own people, but they would see as their own people, to be used for propaganda purposes, and that has happened consistently throughout this. So I can't disagree with that at all. Jonathan, thank you for your patience today as well. That's Jonathan Sacerdoti, the journalist and broadcaster. Thank you to Mick, who's been in touch and says, now that Starmer has indicated recognising Palestine, what will happen to all those protesting in support of Palestine action? It must be confusing for police, says Mick. Also on Andrew has been in touch to say, saying Savile would have used the internet and then saying Farage is pure speculation. If I said Edward I would not have let a single immigrant into the country, I would rightly be told I have no way of knowing. The big story breaking in the last few minutes as well is in regard to all flights at all airports in this entire country. The United Kingdom have been suspended due to a radar failure. The National Air Traffic Services says, or lack of service, says as a result of a technical issue at NATS Swanwick, NATS being the National Air Traffic Services, Air Traffic Control, we are limiting the number of aircraft flying in the London control area in order to ensure safety, which is always our first priority. We apologise for any delays this may cause. Our engineers are working hard to resolve the problem as quickly as possible, and we are working closely with airlines to help minimise disruption. At this stage, we cannot say how long it will be before operations are back to normal. Please check with your airline on the status of your flight. Well, Lisa Minnow, who is the travel editor of The Sun, coming next with everything you need to know about this. If you're travelling today, if you're picking somebody up from an airport, you need to stay tuned to talk. This is a huge, huge issue that the problems with radar has failed in this country, and we're in a situation where many, many flights have been grounded. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the technical issue has now been resolved in regard to the radar. Our engineers, says the National Air Traffic Services, says our engineers have now restored the system that was affected this afternoon. We're in the process of resuming normal operations in the London area. We continue to work closely with airlines and airport customers to minimise disruption. We apologise for any inconvenience this has caused. We can see actually live on the screen now, if you're looking at it, if you're listening on the radio, I will describe it to you. You would expect at that whole area around London, especially around Heathrow, where the footage is, that there would be loads of different flights coming in. And what we know, of course, is that many of them have been grounded. Let's speak to Lisa Minow now. She is the travel editor of The Sun. Lisa, what an embarrassment for the air traffic control services, and what a huge inconvenience, even though this has only lasted a matter of minutes. Nonetheless, the effects, I would imagine, will be felt right across the day and presumably into tomorrow as well.
Very much so. My own sister is sat in a plane in Croatia at the moment, unable to take off because of this. You've got to understand this is the busiest time of year. You've got hundreds and hundreds of flights affected across both Gatwick and Heathrow, and any small amount of a delay is going to have an issue. We don't yet know if that's going to have an impact on airports across the UK, but we have had some information that perhaps it's impacted at Newcastle as well. Whatever it is, you know, when you look at the likes of Mike O'Leary from Ryanair constantly saying that he's very unhappy with the service he's getting from air traffic control, both here in the UK and in Europe. It is very embarrassing for them to have to be dealing with this in the peak summer season.
Well, I'm just getting some news into the newsroom here at Talk. All departures at Edinburgh being held. Edinburgh is affected. Flights suspended at Birmingham, Manchester, Stansted, East Midlands airports, all affected by this. All outbound flights from the UK were affected earlier on. But of course, this only broke about, literally less than 20 minutes ago. But of course, as you say, will have huge effects in the future, and there today and tomorrow, I would imagine, as well. It is such an incredibly busy time. If you're perhaps got Talk on the car radio on your way to the airport because you're flying off for your holiday or for a business trip or whatever, what would your advice be, Lisa? What should people do?
If you're already en route, of course, continue to make your way to the airport. But I would first check with your airline. I think that's going to be the number one priority. Check with your airline if your flight is still going to be going, particularly if you're flying later tonight or tomorrow. Check with your airline in advance and make sure you know what your rights are. What your rights are. This is not an airline's fault. There is no compensation due. It costs airlines hundreds of millions when we have these kind of situations with air traffic control, and they are very frustrated by this. It costs them a lot of money, but you do have rights. The airline has a duty of care to look after you. They should be getting you to your destination as quickly as possible. But obviously, in a situation like this, so fast moving, so last minute, it could be that airlines are going to have to really scramble to actually try to get their schedules back up and running again.
Lisa, thank you. That's Lisa Minow there, the Sun travel editor. Appreciate that. Lots of information coming in. We now know that this radar issue is over. What we also know is that it's going to take quite a while for things to get back up and running to the same extent that they were meant to. On the screen there we have the radar situation. These are live radar situation in regard to Heathrow, just to the west of London, of course. They're, as far as I can see there, from the entire sort of west and north and the sort of western half of London, there only appears to be, apart from around Heathrow, one flight in the air there and one helicopter. So we will see what the situation is. We'll continue to monitor that. We're going to talk to Paul Charles about this in a second too, of the PC agency. He knows all about the radar and all the different technical aspects of this. In the last few minutes, on the other major story breaking this hour, that is of course the conviction of Mohammed Fahir Amaz, the man who's been found guilty of assaulting 2 female police officers at Manchester Airport. PC Lydia Ward had actual bodily harm caused to her, I presume, but I don't know. But I presume that is the police officer who had her nose broken, and the assault of the emergency worker PC Ellie Cook. There could well be a retrial of his brother Mohammed Ahmad, and I want to make sure that we don't prejudice that retrial. What I do know is that Mike Peake, who is the chairman of the Greater Manchester Police Federation, that's essentially the union of police officers in Manchester, has released this statement and says police officers in Manchester work in a difficult, dangerous and dynamic world where there is no such thing as a routine incident. They deserve support in that work from the public and politicians. The distressing scenes we have seen during this trial show some of the worst side of police work that our officers are faced with. 35 officers are assaulted in Greater Manchester Police every week. we are bloodied and we are bruised. We have been supporting the officers concerned at the incident at Manchester Airport last summer since it occurred, and as a federation we will continue to do so. And they're saying they're making no further comment at the time. That is, of course, because the Crown Prosecution Service will be making a decision in regard to whether there is a retrial of Mohammed Ahmad, the 26-year-old who denied a single charge of assaulting PC Zachary Marston. The jury failed to reach a verdict. In that, we heard the analysis of Peter Blexley a little bit earlier on that. On the travel front, are you on your way to an airport? Are you sitting in an airport at the moment? Are you sitting on a plane listening to talk? Are you someone who has experience of this? Are you having delays at the moment? I know a load of people are going on holidays. Give us a ring. Tell us your experience. 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us.
I think one of the difficulties is that engagement as it goes on now tends to be with so-called community leaders, and I'm not quite sure how community leaders get appointed or elected or emerge. Perhaps they just emerge in the form of the old leaders of the Tory party in the 60s. I don't know, but they seem to have a focus on things that actually don't really matter all that much to people who are losing their phones and losing their cars and losing things from their home when they're burgled.
Yeah, exactly right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, two major pieces of breaking news this Wednesday afternoon. One is that Mohammed Fahir Amaz has been convicted of the assault of two police officers, PC Lydia Ward and PC Ellie Cook. That was after that very, very dramatic footage emerged from Manchester Airport last July. The trial has been ongoing. His brother not convicted of anything, and the Crown Prosecution Service will decide whether there'll be a retrial. It usually takes a few days to decide whether there'll be a retrial or not, because the jury failed to reach a verdict on that. Also, major piece of news in that all flights across the UK have been affected by a radar failure. We know, of course, that there are many issues in regard to that, and there are many people who are affected at Liverpool Airport, at Edinburgh, East Midlands. No flights are departing Heathrow at the moment due to the air traffic control issue. Let's speak to Paul Charles, who is the founder of the PC Agency. He provides travel insight to travel brands. He's a former Virgin Atlantic and Eurostar director. Paul, you know this back to front. When radar fails, this is very, very serious. How could it have failed, and what are the implications going to be, do you think?
Yes, yet again, it's the infrastructure that is not proving resilient, it seems, with a failure from NATS, who obviously control airspace around the UK. Their infrastructure, their systems, their software are absolutely critical to aircraft taking off and landing as they should do. Now, obviously, the details are fairly sketchy, but we certainly understand from NATS that they seem to have restored the failure involving radar at the Swanwick Centre, which is the main centre for air traffic control to the west of London. And if all had gone well today, then there would have been 3,000, just over 3,000 departures, 3,080 departures from the UK, which is round about 570,000 seats, 570,000 passengers.
So you're talking about 500,000 people were due to leave the UK today. Now, most of them did, presumably, because they got to about 4:15 this afternoon and left in the aircraft. But presumably, most of the rest of that number will be affected, at least in some way, in regard to the fact that this radar failure has happened.
That's right. Certainly tens of thousands of people will have been affected, and that's just outbound. You've then got to look at a similar number coming into the UK, whose flights will have been cancelled or certainly delayed or rerouted to somewhere else, not to the airport they were hoping to land at. And we are due to see the busiest day of the year so far this Friday, the 1st of August. So we're on the edge of that. So it's not good timing in terms of this infrastructure falling over. What
will the financial fallout be for the airlines as well? And what are people's rights in regard to this? We had some insight to that from Lisa Minnow earlier on. Just tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, this is clearly one of the busiest times of year, so the volumes are much higher than they would be in an off-peak period or a shoulder season. You can't get busier than the end of July. That is when most people are travelling into and out of the UK for school holidays and vacations. In terms of what people are entitled to, obviously it's always on a case-by-case basis as to the sort of ticket you have or the delay or the cancellation. The airlines, if they cancel a flight, if it's due to their own cause, then they would be more liable for more compensation. But in this particular case, let's see the detail, but this was an issue outside of their control that they would argue. And if most flights are 2 to 3 hours late, then there would be no compensation due. That comes within the time frame allowed for delays. So,
and it's not the aircraft's fault themselves as well, and that has a bearing on this as well, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. But if NATS can get things up and running relatively quickly and delays are kept to 2 to 3 hours, obviously it's stressful, obviously it's inconvenient for many people, but it wouldn't involve therefore triggering any compensation of any kind. It would just be very, very frustrating for the tens of thousands of people affected.
How could this go so wrong? I mean, air traffic control is meant to be one of the most, I mean, it is really, really high stakes. You cannot be an air traffic controller and have a bad day. That is not okay. That can never happen. Air traffic control should be one of the most secure, stable, reliable systems because quite literally lives depend on it.
Yes, you're absolutely spot on. It's one of the most critical systems in the UK. You could argue it's almost a fourth emergency service because so many people up in the air rely on the quality of the system, that it's well maintained, that it's invested in, and that the air traffic controllers are strong enough, well trained enough, and up to the job. It is a very stressful job, there's no doubt about it, and air traffic controllers are rewarded for, or should be rewarded, but are usually rewarded well for that job. But yes, it's very stressful, as it is for the passengers who are affected, of course, by any form of delay, especially if they're a nervous flyer. But you've got to question the resilience again of a system that fell over less than 2 years ago. We had the same, or we had similar issues where NATS could not resolve the system within minutes, as they should be able to do, and it led to substantial delays, as you recall, on a bank holiday. So yet again, we've got an infrastructure failure of some kind, and you've got to ask why these systems still keep falling over.
Yes, and that is a very, very big question because, as you correctly say, it's just weeks since another major failure occurred in regard to our airline infrastructure. The fact that this radar system was down for 20 minutes, I mean, I know you're not necessarily a technical expert when it comes to radar, but there will be questions being asked immediately in regard to how did this happen, what were the systems in place, what was the backup aspect, and also you know, I don't want to be alarmist about this, but was there a cyber attack here? You know, there are questions that will be asked about that. So internally, what happens now? Who asks the questions? Presumably there's an inquiry ongoing as we speak, Paul.
Well, it's very early stages, as you say, but I have to say I'd be surprised about a cyber attack because some of the systems are relatively old. And actually, that makes it harder to get into those systems because they're not as modern as they should be. And as we know from the major incident 2 years ago on the bank holiday, then that wasn't a cyber attack. It was just a serious software malfunction, of course, where the wrong aircraft code was inputted into the system. We've got to see what comes out in the next few hours, but I would think it's just the lack of resilience, and it goes back to having good backup systems, similar to the issue with Heathrow earlier this year when the substation fire affected the whole of Heathrow for nearly 24 hours or so. It's about those backup systems. When you have such important infrastructure, you have to have strong backup systems. And yet again, I think Nats is going to have to answer why these things keep falling over.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We have a texter who says, please can you ask Paul, exactly the same Nats issue happened this week last year, apparently. I don't think it was quite on the same scale. I was due to fly from Gatwick to Switzerland for my birthday. My flight was cancelled 3 days in a row. I'm due to make the same trip this year. Is that a weird coincidence or what? It certainly is. What would your general advice be, Paul, to people who are maybe even listening to this or watching this on their way into the airport? Maybe they're in the airport at the moment. What would you say to them? How should they act and what should they do to make sure that they get to where they are as soon as possible, and to also cooperate with the authorities to make sure that we are kind of doing our bit to make sure that we get there in time and we don't cause any further delays for anybody else, including our fellow passengers?
Well, the first thing, without doubt, I'd advise is to keep calm. It's not easy in a situation like this. It's very stressful for passengers, but by being overly anxious and stressed about it, it can often lead to further issues. So try and remain calm. It will be sorted out. In fact, Nats already says it's resolved, even if it leads to delays of 2 to 3 hours or so. Generally, the airlines will get you to your destination, or you will land within a few hours. So, you know, it could be worse. You might find cancellations, but generally you will take off or land with delays. So that's the first thing. The next thing is obviously to listen to the advice from your airline. They will email, they will text, they will use your contact details to give you the latest information. So do look out for any messages that come through from them. If you're at the airport, check the departure boards, obviously, keep an eye on those, and listen to the announcements that are made. But often in this sort of situation, especially on this, one of the busiest days of the year for people taking off, certainly from the UK, I would say just please remain calm. It will be sorted. And I'm afraid just accept that there will be a 2 to 3 hour delay probably to your flight.
Thank you, Paul. Much appreciated there. That's Paul Charles, who is the founder of the PC Agency. I just want to update you on these two stories. We know as well that there is this air traffic control issue. UK airports hit by air traffic control technical issue. It seems to have stopped now. Radar seems to be back on the radar, as it were, and the National Air Traffic Services up and running again. It was about 20 minutes it was down for, but there are, of course, many, many thousands of people, some of those 570,000 people who are taking those flights today, that will affect. So if you are affected by this, I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. The other huge story breaking almost exactly an hour ago is that Mohammed Fahir Amaz has been found guilty at Liverpool Crown Court of assaulting 2 female police officers. This was after the Manchester Airport incident last year. He was convicted of the assault of PC Lydia Ward causing actual bodily harm and the assault of the emergency worker PC Ellie Cook. So what does the Crown Prosecution Service do now in regard to his brother? Well, his brother Mohammed Ahmad is 26. He denied a single charge, namely that he assaulted PC Zachary Marsden causing actual bodily harm. He denies that charge, and jurors were unable to reach a verdict on that charge in regard to both the men. So the question is, what does the Crown Prosecution Service do now? Well, what they will do is they'll get the views of the alleged victim. The default position, as I understand it, is to seek a retrial as long as the alleged victim is supportive. One factor the Crown Prosecution Service is obviously going to have to consider is whether or not a conviction in relation to that count will have an impact on the overall sentence, because we have a conviction certainly in regard to Mohammed Fahir Amaz in regard to the assaults of those 2 police officers, and what would that actually mean for that sentence? And will he be sentenced before the retrial actually happens? And as we know, we're sitting here almost a year on from what happened. In fact, almost exactly a year on from what happened in Manchester Airport last July. So it takes a while for these retrials to happen. So one of the brothers could be waiting for his sentence for some time, the one who is convicted, Mohammed Fahir Amaz. As it's the only charge the older brother faces, it is probably likely, from what I understand of these things, that a retrial will be sought. The Crown Prosecution Services usually ask for 7 days to decide these things. They'll get the views of the alleged victim, of the officer in the case, from the prosecution barrister, from the judge. The police will inevitably want to pursue a retrial, and the Crown Prosecution Service will want to support the police. We've heard as well from Mike Peake, the chairman of the Greater Manchester Police Federation, who has responded to the conviction that has happened in this. He's making no further comment other than to talk about police officers working in a difficult, dangerous and dynamic world. There's no such thing as a routine incident. They deserve the support from public and politicians. He says, Mike Peake, that the distressing scenes we've seen during this trial show some of the worst side of police work that our officers are faced with. 35 officers assaulted in Greater Manchester Police every week. We are bloodied and we are bruised, says Mike Peake, the chairman of the Greater Manchester Police Federation. We have been supporting the officers concerned in the incident at Manchester Airport last summer since it occurred, and as a federation we will continue to do so. The question is as well is whether there will be a retrial of the man who was not convicted, Mohammed Amaz, who is 26, who's denied the single charge of assaulting PC Zachary Marsden. It's also interesting that, of course, there are police misconduct investigations going on in regard to the police, because there was a police officer who kicked someone, or apparently kicked someone, in the head as part of all of that. What we know, of course, is that there was a greater context to that. There was a fight, and we know today that Mohammed Fahir Amaz was convicted of the assault of 2 police officers, breaking the nose of Lydia Ward, and the assault of an emergency worker, PC Ellie Cook. So there's a lot to come out further in this. We want to be really careful in what we say. We don't want to prejudice a possible retrial. We've got to be careful legally, but what we do know is that one of those brothers has been convicted. The other has the jury failed to reach a verdict. There may well be a retrial. Lots happening today, and we've barely spoken, we have a little bit with Jonathan Sacerdoti, about the fact that Palestine is to be recognised as a state by Keir Starmer and by the UK government. That is to be the official position of this government. So loads to talk about on that. Let us know your thoughts. We haven't even got to the barking dogs having an effect on people's education. Lots to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, good evening. This is Talk. Two major breaking stories in the last hour. One is that one of the brothers accused of the Manchester airport fight attack, including breaking the nose of a police officer, has been convicted on a number of charges. His brother, well, the jury failed to reach a verdict. He may well face a retrial. Lots to discuss in a second with a King's Counsel, a senior barrister who's going to join us on that. Also, radar collapsed in this country, the radar system that keeps our planes in the air, for 20 minutes in the last hour. Over 500,000 people who are flying today are going to be affected by that. Maybe you're one of them. 0344 499 1000. There's also the small matter of recognising Palestine as a state. That is a huge political row which has been happening. And there are people who say prioritise flights taking off over net zero. That is what people are telling airlines. We'll discuss all of this between now and 7 o'clock, and we will get to the noisy dog story as well, I promise you. Let me know your thoughts on the things we can talk about. One thing I do not want to do over the course of this programme or at any stage on Talk is to prejudice a possible retrial of the person alleged to have been involved in that second Manchester attack. But I'll keep you right on it, but you can certainly give me a ring about whatever you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. You can send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Peter Cardwell. Loads to discuss between now and 7. It is a big news day. Silly season? What's that? Stay with us here on Talk. Well, as we know, in the last hour, a man called Mohammed Fahir Amaz, who is 20, has been found guilty at Liverpool Crown Court of assaulting two female police officers, PC Lydia Ward. He caused her actual bodily harm by breaking her nose, and the assault of emergency worker PC Ellie Cook. That was the footage, of course, was captured at Manchester Airport last July. Well, Simon Spence KC is a criminal barrister at Red Lion Chambers and joins me now. Simon, thank you for joining us on short notice. I do appreciate this. What happens now, because there may well be a retrial? My understanding is that the Crown Prosecution Service will take a few days to think about whether that happens. That's in regard to Mohammed Ahmad, who is 26, and he denied a single charge of assaulting PC Zachary Morrison, causing actual bodily harm. The jury failed to reach a verdict on that. So just tell us what happens next.
Well, what will happen is that the Crown Prosecution Service and the prosecuting barrister or barristers from the case will reflect on the evidence, make a decision as to whether the case was either significantly weakened or strengthened during the course of the first trial, and then make a decision as whether there remains a realistic prospect of conviction with a different jury on a retrial. And if they conclude that it is, then the procedural convention, it's not actually set in law, it's just a convention, is that the prosecution can have a second go, putting it bluntly. That's when the jury have failed to agree. If a jury is discharged before they go out to consider a verdict, then you're back to square one, and if that jury can't agree, you have potentially a third go. But the general rule is the prosecution are entitled to ask a second jury to look at the same evidence and see if they can reach a decision.
What we know as well in regard to the jury was that there were 12, as there usually are. One of them was discharged to go on holiday. That was a pre-arranged holiday that happened from Monday. And we know that the judge said at one stage that there could well be a majority verdict of 10 versus 1. That appears to have happened in regard to Mohammed Fahir Amaz. What is, in regard to what happens next, in regard to an actual sentencing, will it be after the possible retrial that a sentencing happens? How does that work, Simon?
Well, certainly the trial as a whole will have to conclude. So if there are co-defendants still awaiting trial for whatever reason, then the judge won't want to pass sentence until he's got the full overall picture. Because
that could, in theory, prejudice the possible retrial?
Well, it wouldn't prejudice the retrial because the judge could make a contempt of court act order preventing the publication of the sentence that had been imposed.
Okay.
But with the sentencing guidelines in relation to assault, and particularly in relation to assaulting emergency workers and police officers, if it's a group attack, and I'm not commenting one way or the other on the evidence, but if it's a group attack as opposed by a single person, that's seen as an aggravating factor, in which case the sentence could be longer than if it's one person attacking a police officer as opposed to a group. And so the judge's view would be that he hasn't got a full, complete picture and how to approach the question of sentence on the one who's been convicted until there are verdicts, if there are going to be, on the other defendants.
And there are police, aside from the legal process, there are misconduct allegations and indeed a process in regard to that. Does that have any bearing whatsoever on the legal process?
It doesn't on the criminal legal process. Generally speaking, if there are other non-criminal
we're just losing Simon there. Listen, thank you, Simon. It certainly illuminated quite a lot of that. Simon Spence there. We just had a problem with the connection there at the end. Simon Spence, KC, he's a criminal barrister at Red Lion Chambers. Thanks to him for illuminating a lot of that. Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, on the other big story. This is in regard to the air traffic control system. She has tweeted, "I'm aware of the technical issue which has impacted NAT's operations, causing travel disruption this afternoon. I've been informed systems have now been restored, but continued disruption is expected. Passengers should check with individual airports for advice." I'll give you some advice, Heidi. Don't use impacted as a verb. "I'm aware of a technical issue," she says that passengers should check with individual airports. We'll bring you the latest on that, of course, as the show goes on. We are hoping to speak to another travel expert as time goes on. Lots of news this afternoon, including the fallout, huge political fallout, not just here in this country, but right across the world. America, Israel, many of the Gulf states as well have reacted to the fact that Keir Starmer has said that the UK is going to recognise a state of Palestine. An official, a terrorist from Hamas, has also said that recognising Palestine is a victory. They are praising what Keir Starmer is doing, and when Hamas terrorists are praising you, maybe you're not doing the right thing. Let's speak to Yaakov Katz, who's a former editor of the Jerusalem Post. He's a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Yaakov, we know that there is a significant reaction here in the UK. I think a lot of this is to do with domestic political issues, but in regard to what those across the Middle East are saying here, some Gulf states as well who aren't happy about this, what is your analysis and reaction?
Well, I think, Peter, is that unfortunately this decision by Sir Starmer, by the Prime Minister, what it essentially does is it's a reward to Hamas and to the Palestinian Authority, and basically teaching them that they can carry out a massacre like the one that was put into place and was carried out by Hamas back on October 7th, 2023. They can murder the most Jews on a single day since the Holocaust. They can take another 251 hostage. They can still hold on to 50 hostages who continue to languish in those Hamas terror dungeons underneath the Gaza Strip. And what do they get in return? They get recognition from the British government of a Palestinian independent state. I mean, shouldn't they have to be of a peaceful nature? Shouldn't they have to embrace a culture that does not reward death? Shouldn't they have to change their education system that doesn't hail the martyrs, the so-called martyrs who murder Jews before they get a Palestinian state? So I fear that what Starmer has done is not only is he rewarding terrorism, but he is prolonging the war, because if you're Hamas now, what incentive do you have to end this conflict?
It's a very, very good point, and we have a senior Hamas official. Anybody who says official in regard to Hamas, the word you're looking for is terrorist. Bassem Naim, who is a former minister in the terror group's government of Gaza, government, I use the word loosely, dictatorship, said international support for Palestinian self-determination shows we are moving in the right direction. So this has been welcomed by Hamas. Now, Keir Starmer would say this is all about the humanitarian crisis. I wonder, and I've been really racking my brains as to how recognition of a Palestinian state helps in any way those people who are dealing with the severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
One has nothing to do with the other, Peter. You're 100% right. I mean, also, who's the bad guy in this war? Let's remember who attacked who. Hamas attacked Israel. Hamas massacred Israelis. Hamas took Israelis hostages. Israel embarked on a war to defend itself and to restore security and to eliminate an Iranian-backed terrorist group that poses a threat to the entire Western world. But what does Starmer do? He threatens Israel, the victim. He doesn't threaten Hamas. I don't see him saying to Hamas or the Palestinian
Well,
Authority.
this is the weird thing, because in all of this, Yaakov, there's nothing. I mean, he did say he wants them to release the hostages. He's been saying that for the last
That's lip service, yes.
2 years. He has been saying that, in fairness to Keir Starmer. He's saying he wants them to end the war and all the rest of it. But the conditions are on Israel. And my point in all of this is, if you genuinely believe this, if you really think that recognising a Palestinian state will bring peace in the Middle East, if you honestly think that that is the right thing to do, just do it. Just do it. Stop trying to cajole Israel with all of this in regard to, what the conditions that probably won't happen between now and September. So he's essentially saying, well, if you do this, then I won't recognise a state of Palestine. And he knows that those conditions that he's putting on them, for example, a commitment on annexation of the West Bank, for example, that is something that Israel is not going to do in a month of Sundays. Therefore, he's going to go ahead with it anyway. If you genuinely believe this stuff, just do it now.
Peter, I totally agree with you, and I'll say even more than that. Look, there is a problem here, right? We do need a political horizon. Israel does also, in my opinion, need to articulate an outline. What is the strategic objective, and where are we going with this war, and what is to come next? And we should be working with our allies around the world, and the UK has traditionally been a historic ally of the State of Israel, but this isn't the way you treat your friends. You don't treat a friend who's at war with conditions. I don't think anyone came to the British government during World War II when they were fighting the Nazis during the Blitz and said, listen, you agree to ABC or else. That wasn't the way things were done, and that shouldn't be the way things are done for the State of Israel. We can have a lot of criticism of what's happening in Gaza and the issues with humanitarian aid, and I've been critical of the way that the Israeli government has been managing that situation as well. But let's remember who's to blame, and let's remember who attacked who. Israel has been facing a 7-front war for the last 2 years. We just fought a battle with Iran, eliminating and setting back their nuclear program, which is a favor, not just for Israel, but it's a favor for the entire world. This only brings better reality and a better future for the UK, for the United States, for all of Europe, and of course for the State of Israel, which is why Israel did it. We just had a missile late last night. I got home from dinner with my daughter, and we had to go into the bomb shelter because the Houthis from Yemen had fired another missile towards Israel. So we're looking at a country that is still embattled, still attacked, still under threat. And who does the British government issue conditions and threaten? The victim and their ally. That's not how things are supposed to be done.
Yaakov, thank you. That's Yaakov Katz, who's the former editor of the Jerusalem Post. He's also a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. What do you think of this? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Graham's been in touch from Bushy and says, when will Hamas be inviting Keir Starmer for a state visit? Paul in Belfast says, so if Israel does agree to a ceasefire, the British government won't recognise the state of Palestine? Huh? Yes, that's correct. Yes, and they're basically saying that it's down to Israel. So the conditions that Keir Starmer is putting on this is essentially saying, Israel, give us a ceasefire. Well, the fact is that Israel has proposed a ceasefire on a number of different occasions, and that has been rejected by Hamas terrorists. So what possible incentive is there for Hamas terrorists to agree to a ceasefire over the next few months in regard to the UK position? So Paul, thank you for that. James has been in touch as well and says the Jewish community in this country must feel, I can't speak for them, but I can't say how I feel. I am ashamed of my government. I will support the Jewish community wherever I can. James, good for you. David in Somerset says, it appears that Italy had a similar radar issue affecting around 320 flights last month. Coincidence, I guess, says David. Leslie says, how can Starmer prescribe Palestine Action as a terrorist group, yet yesterday, with his announcement, has sided with them? Well, I don't think he's siding with Palestine Action, but he's certainly siding, he would argue, with the Palestinian people and the peaceful Palestinian people, Leslie. But I can totally see your confusion over that. It's a perfectly reasonable point to make. person calling themselves an old lady in the Midlands says, hi Peter, to me it seems that terrorism pays. Paul in Fife says, given there's such a massive shortage of food in Gaza, why haven't Hamas surrendered? I mean, they must be starving, mustn't they? Have you ever seen an emaciated Hamas spokesman? No, I have not, and I've seen plenty of footage of Hamas terrorists well fed, eating plenty of food, and that is because they loot the aid. Jeff says, well actually I'll read another one from Rachel, who's talking about this story in regard to the attacker who has been convicted in Liverpool of the Manchester Airport fracas there. He says, afternoon Peter, I'm glad that this person has been convicted. Talking there, of course, about Mohammed Fahir Amaz, who's been found guilty at Liverpool Crown Court of assaulting 2 female police officers. I'm glad he has been found guilty. I hope the sentence fits the crime, says Rachel. Thank you to Yule and Ballymena and indeed Ricky, who have been in touch on this issue, saying, thanking me for doing a good job. And actually, there was a broadcast I did earlier with another broadcaster where I got pretty animated on this particular issue in regard to Palestinian statehood. So thank you to Ricky and thank you to Yule for your very kind words. Herbie is in Harrow and has given me a ring on this, 0344 499 1000. Herbie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter. Well, Peter, the emergency meeting that was held on Tuesday, it wasn't the government that was announced, it was only the party members that was there. It didn't go to the government itself. It was not put to
didn't go to the House of Commons, certainly, yeah.
No, certainly, you know, so the voting was very, very minimal with only just the cabinet attending. Nobody else had a say in the matter.
That's right.
So where can it be the government? How can it be government?
Well, it's the government's position. It is Keir Starmer's position, and he knows that a lot of his MPs, not just in his party, but in Jeremy Corbyn's grouping as well, those pro-Gaza MPs as well, 3 or 4 of them who are in various constituencies, he knows that if he puts this to Parliament, he's going to get it through, Herbie.
Well, he may do. We don't know for certain. We do not know for certain because things are changing all the time. We know that. But it's still undemocratic what he's done. You know, as I say, he's a coward. He's a man of no principles whatsoever. He's really a man who's a waste of space as far as I can see. Can't we find a one-way ticket to Mars for him and his cronies to go up there?
A one-way ticket to Mars, that's a radical idea. I wonder if we get through the radar. Herbie, thank you very much indeed. That's Herbie from Harrow. We'll get an update on what's happening with the radar situation in just a minute. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about net zero in regard to people's priorities about flights taking off on time. Loads to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Jeff says, don't you think it's about time the King steps in and tells the government that they're not doing what's in the country's best interest on immigration and other matters? Well, look, they're the democratically elected government. If you disagree with them, tell me all about it. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
I think one of the difficulties is that engagement as it goes on now tends to be with so-called community leaders. And I'm not quite sure how community leaders get appointed or elected or emerge. Perhaps they just emerge in the form of the old leaders of the Tory party in the 60s. I don't know. But they seem to have a focus on things that actually don't really matter all that much to people who are losing their phones and losing their cars and losing things from their home when they're burgled.
Yeah, exactly right.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, there's been quite a lot happening this afternoon, not least in regard to the skies. The radar, almost exactly an hour ago, the radar system collapsed in this country. And if you're one of the 570,000 people who are using a plane today, many people, of course, going on their holidays, it is the school holidays, well, lots happening. Let me know your thoughts on all of this, 0344 499 1000, for an update on exactly what's going on. Rebecca Swash is with us, the Talk reporter. Rebecca, you're very welcome into the studio. What's going on?
OK, so obviously we know all outbound flights were affected in the UK earlier because of this technical problem with the air traffic control system. The company involved is NATS. So they've since said that this problem has now been resolved. But there are still lots of delays across the country being reported. Manchester, Birmingham Airport has said departing flights from many UK airports have been suspended. Gatwick Airport has said all outbound flights are being affected across the UK. So while this problem has been fixed, it's obvious that it's still causing a knock-on effect of delays.
It's different if you're in, as I have often been, somewhere like Belfast International Airport or George Best Belfast City Airport. If a flight's delayed by a short period, there aren't lots of other flights waiting to go because it's a smaller. There are two examples of smallish airports. They're big-ish, but at Heathrow, there are flights taking off every couple of minutes. So if you stop that for 20 minutes, that's going to have a huge effect, and that's the case for many airports right across the United Kingdom.
Exactly. So we are expecting there to be a knock-on effect, potentially, you know, delays later into this evening, and who knows when the problem will sort itself out. But in the meantime, yeah, these airports are saying we are having delays. The advice is, if you have a flight booked, to just check with your airline before you go to the airport. We've heard lots of travel experts saying that. Check with your airline what's going on with your flight, even if you're flying later this evening or tomorrow, because we just don't know when this is going to be sorted. But at the moment, I mean, the technical problem being fixed suggests that, you know, this is now on the way to being sorted.
Let's hope so, certainly, and thank you so much for that update. That is Rebecca Swash there, our reporter here at Talk, so thank you for that. Somewhat ironically, we're talking now to Ross Clark, who is a columnist at The Sun and the author of Not Zero, about another issue in regard to this, the fact that the public wants flights to take off on time, and believing that this is a much bigger issue than net zero. Ross, just take us through this.
Good afternoon. Well, I think the background to this is that the National Air Traffic Control Service wants to reconfigure the flight paths over Britain, which haven't essentially changed since the 1950s, although they've been used vastly more intensively than they were then. And it sort of, you know, a lot of sort of environmental objections from people who live under the flight paths, and so the NATS, the National Air Traffic Control Service, commissioned a poll which asked, you know, what's the most important, planes that take off and land on time, or the sort of more environmental stuff.
And unsurprisingly, people thought getting to and from destinations was something that so many people are not actually experiencing today. Well, that is an incredibly important thing, and maybe net zero is something that's less important. This is what I have always argued about net zero, is that most people, not everybody, but most people believe that some form of recycling, some form of awareness of the environment, emissions are not a great thing. I believe in man-made climate change. I think that's a thing. Not all of our viewers and listeners do. But the fact is that all of that is certainly less important than the fact that we need a functioning economy, we need people to get places to and from one another, and if it's going to change our lifestyle substantively, well, that is not worth the price, especially when you see places like China, which has created more carbon emissions than the whole of Asia within the last year.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing this poll does is it sort of echoes what we get over and over again when you ask the public, do you want to hit net zero targets? Do you want to reduce carbon emissions? People say, yes, of course we do. And it's quite right to be concerned about the environment, of course. But when you ask people differently about specific policies which will be needed to achieve net zero, they give you a very different answer. No, I mean, if the government really is going to hit its net zero target by 2050, and it's a legally binding target, don't forget, it would need primary legislation to overthrow it. It won't just mean delayed planes, it will mean virtual end to aviation as we know it, because we simply do not have a zero carbon technology to do the job that fossil fueled planes are doing at the moment. You have electric planes where they can maybe do short island hopping flights, but you're never going to get across the Atlantic on an electric powered plane at current technology. Hydrogen has been suggested. Well, that's just not the dense enough fuel to allow planes of the kind that we've known for the past century. What about sustainable aviation fuel? Well, I think Virgin a couple of years ago flew a plane across the Atlantic powered by a fuel manufactured from used vegetable oil, but there are only so many chip shops in the world, and you certainly can't power the world's airliners on used cooking oil. There just isn't enough of it. The only other option is to manufacture fuel from scratch using carbon dioxide, hydrogen and so on, but that's vastly expensive and would put flying out of the range of most people. So
and certainly people who are not happy about this in general, the survey you're talking about indicated that 52% of UK adults had flown internationally in the previous 12 months, 32% flew domestically, 26% expected to fly more in the following year. So we know certainly that people want to fly, they want to go to different places, they want to have holidays, which is a perfectly reasonable thing. Many people, I'm sure, are doing it right this moment, going to the airport hoping their flight will be on time. And actually it's this lifestyle change, it's this idea that we should all completely change our economy and our lifestyles for net zero that is going to be so completely unpopular. And when you get to the stage where you're telling people, well, this is how you achieve net zero, these are the sacrifices you're going to have to make, unsurprisingly, they're not too happy about that, Ross.
No, they're not, and people won't stand for it when they realise exactly what would be required to achieve net zero. At the moment, it's just still a bit of an abstract idea to most people. They will revolt. And I mean, it's one thing telling people in Britain they can't fly, but I mean, what about some countries which are absolutely dependent on aviation? If you're Australia or New Zealand, aviation is your link to the rest of the world. What if you're Iceland, for example? I mean, there's many countries that are absolutely dependent on aviation to maintain proper connections with the rest of the world. And, we are too, obviously, when it comes to sort of transatlantic flights and so on. So, no, public aren't going to put up with it when they learn what would really be required to achieve net zero.
The fact is that net zero as well is something that we in the UK get very, very anxious and have a lot of debates about. Just paint a picture for us as an expert, the expert that you are, Ross, in regard to other countries. Is this much of a debate in America? Is it much of a debate in India and in China? Because certainly at the international conferences that so many people have, that so many governments have, that it comes up time and time again. But are ordinary people talking about it in those contexts? Because they're not being asked to make nearly the sacrifices that British people are.
Yeah, well, we keep having these conferences, don't we, where COP conferences, where the world's governments will turn up and sign all these pledges and so on. They go back home and do something totally different. I mean, if you remember a couple of years ago, Canada and Brazil were among the countries which were really pressing for the phase out of fossil fuels to be included in the communique from that conference. Then, President Lula Brazil went home, and he's planning to become the world's 7th largest, or the world's 4th largest oil producer by 2030. Canada is expanding its oil and gas industries. I mean, countries doing totally different things. Britain seems to be alone in sort of following up these pledges.
Why is that, Ross, do you think? What is the reasoning for that?
We just have a very different culture of government where, we don't like signing things unless we actually really mean them. And a lot of governments around the world are quite happy to sign things and on the basis that they know they're not going to obey them. But, I say in Britain we have a bit of a different culture. But when it comes to these legally binding pledges to reach net zero, well, Britain's made it. We were the first country really to do it. A few other European countries have made that law. The EU expects every EU member state to do it as well. But outside Europe, they're pretty thin on the ground. China, for example, has a pledge to reach net zero by 2060, 10 years after Britain. But, Xi Jinping has made it absolutely clear that will not be achieved at the cost of economic growth. And indeed, China continues to open coal-fired power stations, which still account for 60% of that country's electricity. I mean, they're taking a very, very different policy than ours. One that's recognises the need for cheap energy in an industrialised nation, and that's what we seem to have forgotten.
Ross, thank you. That's Ross Clark there, who's a columnist at The Sun, author of Not Zero. Richard has sent us a text and says, "Dear Peter, I'm loving talk's moral outrage about giving Palestine statehood. Very amusing. In my opinion, Netanyahu should be tried for war crimes, and all of you at Talk should hang your heads in shame. All the best," says Richard in Shrewsbury. Richard, I'm glad you're amused by this. I don't think that the 1,200 people who were murdered by Hamas terrorists, the many thousands of people in Gaza who are currently in horrendous humanitarian conditions, who are starving, are in any way amused. I don't think they're smiling. I don't think they're laughing. I don't think they're having a good time. I don't think people in Israel who are having rockets fired to them by the Houthis at the moment, I don't think they're smiling or being amused by this. There's a debate to be had over Palestinian statehood. My position has always been clear on this, which is that I do believe there should be a two-state solution. That is against the wishes of the majority of people in Israel, so how can that be achieved? It's also against the wishes of Hamas, who want a one-state solution. They want to eradicate Israel. And for every single person who sings or says from the river to the sea, well, they are calling for the eradication of Israel and the only Jewish state in the world. You may call it moral outrage, but there's a lot to be morally outraged by. The attacks of the 7th of October, yes, some of the actions are authorised by Benjamin Netanyahu. He is not someone who I universally condone. He is not someone who I universally say gets everything right. And clearly a major aspect of the humanitarian problems and issues and crisis in Israel, in Gaza, I should say, is down to what Netanyahu has done or indeed not done. To say that it's amusing is incredibly tasteless. It is an incredibly sad thing that you think that, and that you picked up your phone and decided to text in. There are people who are entitled to their opinion. That's everybody. We're the home of free speech. You're entitled to your opinion, and I've read out your message. But to say you're amused by our moral outrage, why am I morally outraged? Well, it's very simple. I'm morally outraged because saying there should be a Palestinian state is rewarding Hamas. Saying there should be a Palestinian state and that there are conditions that Israel should accede to, that is rewarding Hamas. Should Israel agree to a ceasefire? Yes, it should. It has done that on a number of occasions, and the roadblock to that has been Hamas terrorists who don't give back and won't give back 50 hostages who are there, 30 of whom are probably dead, 20 of whom are living in horrendous conditions. So you can be amused as much as you want. I'm going to have a serious debate. We're going to continue to have that on Talk after the break, and you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000 to let me know your thoughts on it. Richard, I would say thank you for your text, but it's a fatuous piece of nonsense. Have a nice evening. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people getting in touch on the Palestinian statehood issue. Let's speak to Andrew in South Wales. Andrew, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, first, Peter, I'd like to repeat your sentiments on the last person who texted in or left the message. I think, it's kind of absolutely abhorrent to make humorous, to make light of this situation. And also worryingly, I think that kind of flagrant, kind of nonchalant anti-Semitism is something that I'm worried about. But
I'm not sure Richard is necessarily anti-Semitic. I do think he's an idiot.
Yeah. Well, it is going to.
Well, the two go hand in hand, as we know, Andrew. But thank you for your support on that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I want to go back to my original point, which was, Keir Starmer recognising the state on Palestine, and I heard someone say this on the news the other night, and ironically and wrongly. We have to kind of say that the Iron Dome and the fact that Israel protects itself and protects its citizens so much has actually worked against it in some sort of ironic way.
Yeah, it's a perverse thing, isn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, because imagine if the missiles were getting through daily, because we're all hearing every day, we're hearing about Hamas casualties, and I think it's terrible that people are getting killed no matter religion, race, creed, or country. But the fact is that I apologise for the sound of that van. Just went past. The fact is that if we were hearing every day of Israeli casualties, God forbid, I think it would be a totally different story.
Yeah.
And so not only are we rewarding kind of Hamas by acknowledging the state of Palestine, but we're also setting a bad precedent by saying to other nations, look, don't bother protecting your citizens. If you want to get recognised in the international community, then just let your citizens get killed.
I think those are all very fair points, Andrew. The thing I worry about as well is the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. In what way is recognition of a Palestinian state that doesn't exist actually going to help that in any way? And that's what the international community needs to do, is to solve the hunger crisis in Gaza and to make sure innocent civilians have food.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, Peter. I totally agree with you, and I do believe in the two-state solution. But the question is Hamas ready for that right now? Are the Palestinian people ready for that right now? But we do need to sort out the humanitarian crisis. The problem is that there's so much obfuscation about what is actually going on in these checkpoints. I read Douglas Murray's book, and he was saying, obviously Israel has got to check everything because of arms going in. So, on the one hand, they've got to stop the arms and militia going in, but on the other hand, we need to get through to these people. So it just seems like, without sounding too bad, is that we don't really know what's really going on at these checkpoints.
No, listen, I think all of those are really good points, Andrew, and thank you for them. There are so many different aspects to this. There's so many issues in regard to this, and I really appreciate your support and your thoughts on that as well, Andrew. I want to speak now to Debbie, who's in Essex, who's given me a shout on 0344 499 1000. Debbie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks, Debbie. Go ahead.
Well, with all what's been going on with Starmer and going on with Gaza, having this, not secret, but having this meeting that's all of a sudden cropped up, in my head I was thinking he's absolutely going to do something to do with the migration, but it wasn't that. But in amongst all of this, his wife, Victoria Starmer, is Jewish. And apparently they bring their children and raise them up with a Jewish tradition.
Yeah, I think that's certainly, I've read that too, yeah.
Yep, and apparently they're also first time ever in Downing Street for official residents to be on the premises, are the first time ever to be a practicing Jewish family.
Well, Disraeli, of course, was a Jew originally, but then converted, so that may well be the case. I don't know about every single Prime Minister. Obviously, you can be Jewish and not support Israel. You can be Jewish and support Israel. The two don't necessarily flow from one another. But I just wonder, in regard to the recognition of a state of Palestine, what your view is on that, Debbie, and what you think Starmer should have done or not done.
What is going on in Palestine? I mean, we are never going to know 100% the truth of what is going on. I'm sure there is awful things going on now, but there is also in our country the most horrific things going on that Keir Starmer should be dealing with and the government should be dealing with. I
think that's a very fair point, Debbie, and actually, sorry to interrupt you, Debbie, but we actually got a very good text message from someone saying the other day, emergency cabinet called back from their holidays, for example, parliamentary recess, to talk about this specific issue. Why has that necessarily been the case? Well, listen, there is definitely a crisis in Gaza, but there's been a crisis in Gaza and indeed in the wider region and in Israel since the war started after the 7th of October attacks. There are many people, and I wonder if you're one of these people, Debbie, who would quite like Keir Starmer to think a bit less about international issues and a bit more about British people at home.
He needs to be dealing what is going on with our country and listening to his people. That, this is our government, and they are not taking any notice of what is going on. And the things that you have put out over the last few days with the immigrants and where they're staying, it's beyond words.
Yeah.
I mean, there are literally no words.
It's just not fair, Debbie. It's just not fair that many of these people who come to this country have contributed absolutely nothing are living in these luxurious conditions.
Oh, it's disgusting. I mean, I'm not saying that not all of these people are doing this. There are people that are massively suffering, and if we can help them, we should do that. But these people that you've been showing the videos of, and again, what is even today, the different news that's been coming out, it's beyond mind-blowing.
Well, the fact is, Debbie, we are a compassionate... Well, you're absolutely right. We're a compassionate country. We've taken in an awful lot of people from Ukraine, from Hong Kong. We take in asylum seekers and 76% of them get asylum in this country. The fact is that there are many people coming to this country because they know of the lifestyle they can expect. They're not coming because they're fleeing persecution. They're coming because of the benefits that are here and the kind of life that you can live in a hotel for such a period of time. And it is just absolutely heartbreaking as a situation. It is unfair, and it's a slap in the face to people who do their best to go out to work every day, contribute to the economy in some way.
For the likes of these people, and the government are not doing anything to help our country, the British people. They are just not doing anything. Why he's getting involved with Gaza is beyond me. it's awful what's going on there, but that's their problem. It isn't our problem. We have a huge problem going on here that is going to erupt at some point, and he just.
So I mostly agree with you, Debbie. I think there are some leaders who can do both. I think there are some people who can deal with the domestic situation, issues here at home, and also have opinions and act to work on the global stage as well. But my point in agreement with you, Debbie, would be that there's so many problems here in the UK, and that has to be any British Prime Minister's #1 priority, domestic issues at home. And I think Keir Starmer has taken an eye off the ball. I think he is focusing far too much on international issues, Debbie.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks very much, Debbie. Thanks for your call. Really appreciate it. We'll take more calls and we will talk about the sport in just a few minutes. Stay with us here on Talk.
I think one of the difficulties is that engagement as it goes on now tends to be with so-called community leaders, and I'm not quite sure how community leaders get appointed or elected or emerge. Perhaps they just emerge in the form of the old leaders of the Tory party in the 60s. I don't know, but they seem to have a focus on things that actually don't really matter all that much to people who are losing their phones and losing their cars and losing things from their home when they're burgled.
Yeah, exactly right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, now it is time for the
Sport Summary on Talk.
And I'm delighted that Sam Ellard is with us, the TalkSport presenter. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm
good
very
to see
good,
you.
thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very, very well. Bad news for the England cricket team. Their captain is going to miss the final test of the Oval tomorrow. Bring us up to date.
Yeah, real shame. It's been a really, really good series. It's the final match of the Oval tomorrow, the 5th and final game. England 2-1 up in a really entertaining, exciting series. And yeah, unfortunately, the captain has got a shoulder problem, so he's going to miss out. He had some real problems with cramp as well in the 4th test match, so he was kind of limping and hobbling through that. It's a really, really quick turnaround with the match finishing on Sunday. The next one starting tomorrow, just 3 days. So fortunately, he's not going to play, which is obviously a massive blow for England. So Ollie Pope, his vice-captain, is going to come in, and captain Jacob Bethell will replace Ben Stokes at number 6. What England have also done is they're not going to play the spinner, Liam Dawson. They're going to go with an all-seam attack. Jamie Overton, Josh Tongue and Gus Atkinson coming into the fast bowling attack to really freshen that up. So it's going to be a 4-man pace attack and then spin with Joe Root and Jacob Bethell. So yeah, no Ben Stokes, sadly. Ollie Pope will captain. Final match, 5th test match tomorrow at the Oval. England 2-1 up with 1 to go.
Lots of transfer news going on at the moment. Liverpool have sold an attacker. Who's off to Munich?
Yeah, Luis Diaz is off to Bayern Munich for a fee.
Big move.
Yeah, big move. He's been in Liverpool for 3 years. Had a really, really good 3 years there, won the Premier League, won lots of trophies there, been a really good player. But Liverpool managed to get 75 million euros for him. So they're selling a player who's 28, only got 2 years left on his deal, didn't want to sign a new deal, and have made a 30 million euro profit on the player. So I think it's one of those where Liverpool have been really active in bringing players in. Ekitike has come in, Wirtz has come in, maybe Alexander Isak's come in. But yeah, I think something they're doing really well and have been really good at for many, many years is getting really good value for players that don't want to be at the club or coming towards the end of their contract. So listen, really good player. I think he'll do really well at Bayern Munich. The Liverpool fans wish him the best. But I think from a Liverpool point of view, as they look to try and hopefully maybe get Alexander Isak through the door, I think they're getting a really good fee here for a player with 2 years left on his deal.
The next story I'm going to ask you about is something of a Def Leppard story.
This is more your story, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you know that song, Can't Stop the Hurt Inside When Love and Hate Collide. It's like your world is colliding with my world in regard to the fact that this is something I actually know something about. So
I don't know much about it, so you can do this one if you want.
I don't know anything about it, but what I do know is that Trump has been here opening Turnberry, the golf course, of course. But Donald Trump's son thinks it could host a future Open, and even I know that's a major golf tournament. So what's going on here?
Yeah, so it's the son of the US President Donald Trump says his father deserves to have his Turnberry course host the Open again, but will probably have left the White House by the time it does that. Again, I'm not commenting on that. That's more of your thing than my thing.
Well, he has to leave the White House. There's no option to leave the White House unless he changes the Constitution. So, yeah, there's no controversy over that. He will be leaving in 3.5 years.
There we go. I like that from you. Really, really. Obviously, I knew that 100%.
Of course.
I know everything about politics.
Yeah.
It's regarded, though, one thing is...
You're familiar with the 22nd Amendment, then, when the president can only serve for 2 terms after FDR died in his 4th term in 1945. You're familiar with that, yeah? Yeah, of course. Obviously. He doesn't know that.
Stop asking stupid questions, Peter.
Sorry.
I mean, one thing I do know is the venue is regarded as one of the best in golf. It last hosted one of the best, well... Whether it's that or the Masters, you know, in terms of the biggest golf tours, the Open is definitely up there. Last hosted the oldest major championship in 2009, 5 years before Trump bought the resort. He wants it again, his son wants it again, and if he gets it, then, well, hey, it's an absolute belter.
Do you think Turnberry is good enough for the Open? I mean, Royal Portrush has just hosted it, and that is a beautiful and world-renowned course. Turnberry, obviously, you can want it to happen, but will it actually happen?
I mean, from what I've seen of the course and looked of the course and read of the course, it looks an absolute belter. It looks fantastic. It's been a long, long time since the Open's been there, and I always kind of think with the Open, something that makes that tournament so special is the fact that it does go to a different course every single year. You know, the Masters is played at Augusta, the same course every year, which is special, but the Open, every year you go to a different course. It provides different challenges in terms of the way the course sits, in terms of the way that it plays, the conditions. So no, I think it'd definitely be a really, really good option. Do you think if, you know, Rory McIlroy does win the Open there, that he gets handed the trophy by Donald Trump?
I think he should. I think that'll be
Did you see Donald Trump hand Chelsea the Club World Cup trophy?
Yeah, that was a bit weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, what was weird, it was weird, I guess, the fact that he gave them the trophy.
Right.
But then what made it really weird is after he gave Reece James, the captain, the trophy, he just stood there and just didn't go anywhere,
didn't go anywhere.
Well, I think when you hand someone the trophy...
Who had the real achievement? That's my question. I mean, Donald Trump would have thought it was him.
Donald Trump got to meet... Donald Trump got to grace Cole Palmer's presence. So Donald Trump is definitely that. But it'd be a bit like, you know, you finishing off the sport, I mean, almost just sitting next to you for the next hour and 6 minutes.
You're very welcome to do so. I mean, I'm not kicking you out.
And, well, as you can see, my politics knowledge is pretty awful.
I mentioned, I'm sure it's not, I mean, I mentioned Franklin Delano Roosevelt there, who was in his 4th term. You know, he had a dog called Fala, and Fala is the only dog, the only presidential pet, in fact, to be part of the memorial, the sort of statue to a president, and that's in Washington, so Fala the dog is there. If only someone would write a book about the political animals of Washington and Westminster.
I see, I don't get the gag there, sorry.
I've written a book
about
that.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah.
How many books did you sell?
Well, I haven't sold any yet, because it's not out until the 15th of September.
You've written a book about dogs?
Yeah, well, about presidential and prime ministerial animals.
How long did it take you to do it?
About 6 months.
And when's it coming out?
15th of September.
Okay.
Thank you, Ofcom. He has asked me legitimate editorial questions about it. So,
is that an Ofcom?
No, well, I'm just wondering. I mean, Ofcom might be annoyed that I had just, you know, introduced it to the conversation, but the fact you've asked me questions about it means they can't touch me. They cannot touch me.
Okay, good.
Okay, good man. Excellent.
We're entering murky waters here,
No murky waters whatsoever. We're on the right side of the Ofcom code.
Let's hope so.
Ryan said he dumped them. Ryan's the producer, and he has his finger over the dump button at all points in case anybody mentions anything that they shouldn't say or says a word they shouldn't say. I think he's perhaps got his tongue in his cheek there. Sam Ellard, talkSPORT presenter, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to date on the sport. On a more serious matter, of course, we were talking about the recognition of a Palestinian state, and Nigel has been in touch to let us know his thoughts about that. He's given us a ring on 0344 499 1000. Nigel, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say on
Hi,
this?
Peter. Good afternoon. I thought your response to that person's rather nasty text was
Richard in Shrewsbury.
Yeah, was measured and rather restrained, so well done for that.
Thank you, Nigel.
You handled it very, very well, very, very well. I think Keir Starmer, as one of your callers alluded to a little while ago, his eyes off the ball. He has no interest in Great Britain. His interest is further afield. And I think what he doesn't understand or accept or has absolutely denied is that why should Great Britain give acknowledgement to a Palestinian state if Palestine wants to wipe Israel and all the Jews off the face of the earth? I wish you could answer that question.
And I think that is a perfectly legitimate question. And if the UK is to recognise the Palestinian state, shouldn't that Palestinian state, whether it's Fatah in the West Bank or whether it is Hamas in Gaza, should they not recognise Israel?
Absolutely. I'm just wondering if this is a rather backdoor attempt by Starmer, who is dwindling in the polls. He's gone down the plug hole further than the drain man can get him out, I suppose.
Well, this is what it's all about, Nigel. This is what it's all about, because we can have as many different arguments about the Middle East, about the humanitarian crisis, which is definitely there, the fact that they're Palestinian statehood. This, I think 90% of this is about domestic politics. I think it's about the pressure that Starmer is under from the backbenchers. And if they're saying do this because they care about it, it makes them feel better about themselves, even though there will be zero tangible difference to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza if we recognise or indeed don't recognise a Palestinian state. It'll make them feel better, and Starmer will say, I've done what the backbenchers want me to do. I think the tail is wagging the dog here.
I agree with you entirely. It's all about votes. I think that's exactly what it's about. And you know, he has he himself, I believe, is a Christian man, and I know that his wife and part of the family are Jewish. So he's in a mixed relationship, and I wish him every success and good health. But you know, I think that he's really, really losing sight of what's going on. Yeah. And I just don't understand how a man in his position is floundering.
Well, he needs to focus on this country. Nigel, thank you. And just time before the news for a voice note from Ian on the air traffic control situation. This is what Ian has to say.
Hi Peter, it's Ian from East Grinstead. I'm glad that we've got such infrastructure that's all ready that we're on a war footing, as Starmer would say. I mean, what a joke we're becoming. We can't even police our own airs properly. Surely there must be a secondary system or something like that. How can we possibly say we're on a war footing?
I think that's a perfectly legitimate point from Ian on the air traffic control system. The country keeps falling down. Our systems keep falling down. The whole radar system in this country was not working for 20 minutes. Yet we say we've got to be on a war footing. It's going to take a heck of a lot more than sentiments from politicians. Listen, Ian, thank you for that. I think you spoke complete sense. Lots more to come, including Brendan O'Neill, who'll be with us in just a minute. He's the chief political writer of Spiked. I've lots to ask him. I want to hear your thoughts too. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. Lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. We're talking to Simon Diggins in just a second, the military analyst, in terms of what has happened in terms of a recognition of a state of Palestine. We'll also talk to Steve Bryan, the former Conservative Health Minister, about the NHS chief accusing the British Medical Association of extortion over rates for current strike cover. Also a new row as thousands of junior doctors can't get NHS jobs. Why is that? We'll talk to Will Barker, who's Deputy Head of News at The Sun, in regard to what is in the paper tomorrow, and we'll take your calls as well. And I promise you, we will get to the story of the barking dogs and the £25,000 of compensation. We did want to do that in the 4 o'clock hour. Guess what? We got slightly off track because of the major problems with radar in this country, the fact that flights were grounded, and of course the news about the conviction in the Manchester attack at the airport. We'll be talking about that as well. Loads to discuss. Discuss it with me. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note. Had a great one of those from Ian and East Grinstead a few minutes ago, actually. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute, please. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on that main number, 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock when Kevin O'Sullivan takes over. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, we'll get to many more calls, texts, tweets, voice notes, smoke signals, telepathic messages, however you want to get in touch with us a little bit later in the hour. But get your call in now and then we can give you a ring back. Just now, at this moment, I want to talk to Colonel Simon Diggins. He's a military and defence analyst, former defence attaché in Kabul, obviously a very senior officer in the UK Army, about the fact that Keir Starmer wants to recognise a Palestinian state. It's been called a victory by a Hamas terrorist, a senior member of their organisation. It's a terrorist organisation, of course. Let's remind ourselves yesterday about what Keir Starmer said about Palestinian statehood. This was yesterday.
I've always said that we will recognise a Palestinian state as a contribution to a proper peace process at the moment of maximum impact for the two-state solution. With that solution now under threat, this is the moment to act. So today, as part of this process towards peace, I can confirm the UK will recognise the State of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution.
Well, look, there's absolutely no doubt that there is a horrendous humanitarian situation in Gaza. I will shed absolutely no tears if Hamas terrorists die. I am certainly very upset, as is a lot of the world, about the fact that there are so many innocent civilians, men, women and children, who are dying in Gaza due to hunger, due to malnutrition, due to all sorts of issues in regard to the war. It's an absolutely horrendous war. I want it to end as soon as possible. One thing that would help end it would be if Hamas gave back the 50 hostages that they're holding. They originally held 251. I've interviewed some of those people who were held in those horrendous conditions. We're in a situation now where there are probably 20 people who are alive. Were the hostages to be given back, were Hamas to surrender, well then this war would end, because they have to. That is the inevitable conclusion. And Israel is going to continue bombing Gaza and doing what it is doing until that happens, until there's a surrender by Hamas or some sort of ceasefire. In terms of what Keir Starmer is doing, is it the right approach? Well, let's speak to Colonel Simon Diggins now, military and defence analyst. Simon, what's your take on this and why it is happening? My view on it, as I've outlined earlier in this programme, is that it has a lot more to do with domestic politics than international politics. What do you think?
Peter, good evening to you. I rather agree with you. It's a rather confusing message that we're getting from the Prime Minister. On the one hand, we will recognise Palestine as a state unless Israel conducts a ceasefire and then starts a negotiation which will eventually lead to a two-state solution. And if they don't agree to do that, then Palestine gets recognised anyway. I mean, the only country that really has to recognise Palestine, and it really counts, is Israel. And that's the key to it. So I'm very confused by what he's trying to do. But I think you're right. It's domestic pressure. I understand it was in the Labour Party's manifesto in 2024, and therefore it's a commitment as far as they're concerned. And there was an indicative vote of MPs, 130 from Labour, others from other parties, all indicating that they would support a Palestinian state. And I think many of us for many, many years have supported the idea of a two-state solution. So that's not particularly new. But the particular timing and why he's doing it now, I think, is rather strange. And as you say, I think it has rather more to do with domestic politics than the situation on the ground.
It's interesting as well that a senior member of Hamas says recognising Palestine is a victory. This is Bassem Naim, formerly a minister in the terror group's government, I use the term loosely, dictatorship, in Gaza, said international support for Palestinian self-determination shows we are moving in the right direction. I wonder, I mean, I've been asked by Peter in Croydon to stop banging on, as he says, about a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Sorry, Peter, I'm not going to stop banging on about that, but I appreciate your kind sentiments in the rest of the message. The point is, Simon, that we're in a situation where that humanitarian crisis will not get any better if the UK recognises the state of Palestine. I just wonder, and your point, which is a very, very good one in regard to Israel, if I were to put conditions on this, if I were the Prime Minister, I would say, what about Fatah and Hamas recognising the state of Israel?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Fatah do theoretically recognise the state of Israel, though it's a little bit ambidextrous sometimes, whether they do or they don't. They blow hot and cold, but they theoretically recognise the state of Israel. Hamas absolutely don't. And I think that's the other thing that's wrong with the way that it's come across. All the conditionality is imposed on Israel. There is no conditionality imposed on Hamas and their behaviour. So it's not in their interest to behave very, very well, and it's not actually in Netanyahu's interest to take any notice of what the UK is doing either. And Netanyahu's government has been vehement in its opposition to what we have done. So I'm unclear where it's going to take it. I recognise it's an ambiguous situation, and I recognise we all want some kind of progress there, but I'm not sure this is the right move at the moment.
It's interesting in regard to the reaction from the United States and Israel accusing Starmer of rewarding Hamas. I mean, you would probably expect them to do that, but nonetheless, we're in a situation, I just think you've got to be quite cynical about this in regard to realising that, you know, Parliament has been prorogued, or Parliament has gone on recess, I should say, until September, so there won't be any vote on this. Had this happened immediately, there would have to be a ministerial statement or an urgent question on that. Also, Starmer was with Trump in Scotland on Monday, yet he chose to announce this on Tuesday rather than discussing it with Trump on Monday. There's quite a lot of jiggery-pokery about this, and a lot of people aren't happy. I just wonder, diplomatically, how you really see where this is, Simon.
Peter, so forgive me, I had a technical problem there. I missed your last question.
I was just wondering, in terms of the fact that Starmer could have announced this during parliamentary term. He could have announced this with Trump on Monday, theoretically as well, yet he has chosen to do so now. In terms of the timing, and specifically with the geopolitical implications of that, what's your view?
Yeah, I think it shows weakness and fear. I mean, the time to do that was when you've got, you're having a conversation with President Trump, who is the other person upon whom the whole thing counts. I have to say, when he was interviewed yesterday, he looked extremely nervous. And I think there's a recognition that he's the pressure is coming from internally, and he's assuaging his own backbenchers rather than necessarily doing anything else. I'm not at all clear it's going to move the situation on at all. I mean, there are issues around humanitarian delivery in there. There's issues around the location of the hostages, and there are other levers we have. We still have other good friends in the Middle East, and I think we'd be better off working those levers. So what can we do to help? How can we negotiate here? How can we help people on the ground to be safe, but also to have a better solution, rather than what does just a little bit appear like a bit of performative grandstanding?
Simon, thank you. I think we're having further communication errors, problems with you there, Simon, but I do appreciate your contribution, as I always do. Colonel Simon Diggins there, military and defence analyst, obviously a very senior officer in the UK Army. Prior to that, Michael's been in touch. Mike in Lincoln says, I was listening to you talk to Debbie earlier on about Starmer focusing on the world stage and neglecting the home front. It occurred to me, if he and his chuckle of clowns of a cabinet don't start focusing on domestic affairs, and there's not a reshuffle to get rid of the majority of the unqualified qualified occupying cabinet post. Then come to the local elections in May next year, we will be looking at a total wipeout of Labour councillors. I do think they're in severe trouble, Mike. I do think Labour will lose a lot of councillors at the next election, because the council election that happened just a few months ago on the early days of May there, I think it was the 1st of May, we were in a situation where Labour weren't defending that many seats. There were lots of Conservative seats. The Conservatives obviously did very, very badly in that, and Reform UK did extremely well. Heather's been in touch as well, says, to have the open golf tournament at Turnberry, amazing golf club. I go through Trump Turnberry Golf Club on the bus, and Turnberry is a beautiful place in South Ayrshire on the west coast of Scotland. Well, Heather, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Laura says, good for you, putting Richard in his place regarding Israel, Palestine and Gaza. Well done. With regards to our illustrious leader, he is only interested in putting himself out there on the world stage for one reason, and one reason only, basically to ensure that he is looked after once he is booted out of office. I truly believe he is losing sight just what is going on in the UK, says Laura. I do think we have to be cynical about this. I do think we have to ask questions. I do think we have to say, Keir Starmer, why is your focus not always on the domestic problems at home? There are loads of domestic problems at home that we keep 10 prime ministers busy all the time, yet there seems to be this huge international focus that seems to be the #1 priority of this prime minister. Look, maybe you think I'm wrong, maybe you think that's unfair. That's okay. You ring me, you let me know I'm wrong, or alternatively that I'm right. 0344 499 1000. On this show, we disagree without being disagreeable. Michael's been in touch and says, now that the UK is a rogue state with a rogue Prime Minister, Trump should cancel the state visit and send Mandelson home. Dave in Dorset says, was it a civil and military radar failure? Plenty of military controllers around with a very good radar available, even a radar site here in Dorset. I was an assistant for 8 years, says Dave in Dorset. Well, thank you for that. Roy is in London and has given me a ring about the Palestinian issue. Lots of people want to get in on that. Roy, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
I mean, first of all, yeah, I mean, the Prime Minister, I mean, it's a disaster domestically. You know, things are going so wrong. You know, it's difficult to see a way out of this. But back to the point in hand here, you know, it occurred to me what he may be able to do here is he should have demanded that Hamas lay down their weapons, surrender, and are completely removed from any influence or government in Gaza. That would possibly reassure the Israelis, also give the people of Gaza some reassurance as well, and maybe placate his Labour MPs, and also gives them a lot of reassurance to our Jewish communities in the UK.
Well, all of that are very fair points, Roy, and I think the issue is that, I mean, Keir Starmer has said some of that. He said he wants the hostages to be released. He says he wants Hamas to have no further role in the governance of Gaza. But he hasn't made that conditional on him recognising a Palestinian state, which makes me think it goes back to this very clear argument about rewarding Hamas. And he's not saying to them, if you don't give back the hostages, I'm not recognising Palestine. If you don't surrender and give up control of the control, they don't have very much control, but they have some control of Gaza, I'm not recognising Palestine. He's not saying that. He's putting the conditions on the Israelis. That's fair enough. The Israelis do need to move in some direction, but they're trying to have a ceasefire with Hamas. They've offered conditions on a number of occasions, and that just hasn't happened. So I don't think this is fair.
Well, this is an interesting thing here, because I was reading one of the papers that the several Arab states or countries have told Hamas they've got to stop this. You know, they've got to put their weapons down, and they've got to get out of you know, they shouldn't be in a position to part their government. But the thing is, with Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, in my opinion, what needs to happen now is, if Hamas don't agree to this, and it will be right, we will get foursquare behind Israel and support them in every way we can, because, you know, Hamas, Hezbollah, IS, Al-Qaeda, they're all affiliated. They're very, very anti-Western. So it is within our interest and the free world, Western Europe and the free world, to defeat these evil people here. You know, you can't reason with these. They have to be got rid of, and then maybe, as President Trump has alluded to, try and, you know, pour money, invest money into the area to, you know, to rebuild it and give those people in Gaza who want to just get on with their lives, give them a new start.
Very, very good points, Roy. Thank you for them. Roy, give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Plenty of time to get your point across between now and 7 o'clock when Kevin O'Sullivan takes over in this chair. Gary, I was reading your message just a second ago there as Roy was chatting, and it is pretty funny, so thank you. I'm just going to read it out here. Gary says, give it a rest, Peter. Air traffic control went down for 20 minutes. Nobody died. All the planes that needed to landed, got down safely, so you could say that it's reassuring that at least we know that their backup plan works. Technology fails occasionally, so what? All you lot at Talk have got to do is plug in a few microphones and have an aerial on the roof to broadcast. Well, we don't actually broadcast through aerials, we broadcast through the internet most of the time anyway. But Gary, I mean, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. And, you know, even in the last interview that we had with Simon Diggins, there were a few problems with Zoom there, which we are used to. But, you know, it's not my job to keep planes in the air. So, Gary, it's a very, very fair point. I will take it in the spirit in which I think it is probably intended. I hope it's intended anyway. And Gary, thank you for that. I will pipe down and learn my lesson. Mark in Norwich says, we have just alienated Israel for nothing. Why doesn't King Charles speak up and express the wish to dissolve Parliament? Every month, Starmer becomes more and more detached from reality, and the public are becoming terrified, says Mark. And Howard in Suffolk says, your analysis is spot on, Peter. Well, thank you, Howard. I'm glad you agree with me, and whether you agree, whether you don't agree, give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. One other very big issue is, of course, the British Medical Association strike. These junior doctors, I'm never going to call them resident doctors, however much they want me to, the NHS chief accusing the BMA of extortion over rates for urgent strike cover. Loads to discuss. Also, the NHS Trust budgets nearly £2 million. What for? For woke staff events, including, I kid you not, this is apparently a thing that your taxpayers' money is being paid for, is used to pay for, International Pronouns Day. Stay with us here on Talk.
The Pacific tectonic plate, which is a huge, dense piece of rock, which is being forced underneath the continental plate, the Asian continental plate, at 3 inches a year. Now, that might not sound very much, but with the mass that's being pushed there and the build-up of tension means that in this region, this part of the Pacific Rim of Fire where this happens, you get build-up of incredible tensions and you get a sudden release.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just want to very briefly say thank you to Ray and Anne from Liverpool. They are listening in Sicily. They've sent me a number of supportive messages over the past couple of weeks, and I want to thank you for that, Ray and Anne. I hope you have a lovely time in Sicily and get safely back to Liverpool. Good job you're not coming back today. Let's talk about the junior doctors' strike, the fallout from all of that. Many junior doctors apparently not being able to get NHS jobs. Steve Bryan is the former Conservative Health Minister, is the host of the Prevention is the New new Cure podcast series. Steve, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Apologies we couldn't get you on yesterday. There was just too much breaking news with that Palestinian story, so many thanks for your patience on that. Tell us first of all about the NHS chief accusing the British Medical Association of extortion over rates for urgent strike cover. This must be a big worry, especially as the strike mandate is there for another few months.
Yeah, nice to chat with you through your aerial. It is unreasonable. But the thing is, Pete, is that there is this organisation, Doctors Vote, who've taken over the BMA, and that has definitely introduced even more radicalisation into the organisation. But there's then thousands of doctors that are members of the BMA who certainly are probably much more circumspect about taking action, striking at all. But the way that ministers, and Jim Mackey, of course, on behalf of ministers, have ratcheted up the narrative in...
He's the chief executive of NHS England, isn't he, Jim Mackey?
He is, indeed. Somebody I know well, who's a very reasonable man. But if you ratchet up the language, then it makes it harder to come back down the ladder. And my fear is, talking to providers and trust chief executive over the last few days, as I have, is that when you make some of the accusations that have been made, is that you make it harder for people to climb down. And they have this mandate, as you say, going right through till January. I think the BMA were always going to go for another round of strike action with this government. I think they wanted to not be seen as kicking the Tories and then rolling over and having their tummies tickled as soon as Labour came in, which is what many in my old party thought would happen. And they were always, I think, going to go for a confrontation with them. And in some ways, I think ministers have taken the bait by ratcheting up the narrative as much as they have. Somebody needs to climb down here. And Wes Streeting, the Secretary of State, says that, he's invited them in for a fresh round of talks next week. To be a fly on the wall with that. What I reflect from my time in 2016 when, we were both in government, I was at the Department of Health with Jeremy Hunt, is that ultimately number 10 probably do need to get involved here. And, while the Prime Minister is in some sort of hostage situation, taking a joyride on Air Force One, people are waiting and waiting and waiting.
What should they do? I mean, what is the right course of action here, Steve? Because you've got people who they've already given an inflation-busting 22% pay rise to. They're now come back asking for another 29.2%. I mean, this is just too much. We don't have the money to pay for this, and services are suffering and patients are suffering.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, ultimately, ministers, the part of the problem ministers have got, Pete, is that they made out that this was all so easy. And if only they were in charge, to just get in the room and we'd sort this. It was quite Trumpian, really, from Wes to say, 24 hours, I'll sort this, get in the room. So we've been through this before with the BMA. You can talk about parking and the water cooler issues and meals and rotas and all those things, but the BMA ultimately just say, but what about the cash? So, I mean, ministers are going to have to stand firm because there's no more money from Treasury. That doesn't mean that there's no more money from doctors. There's an awful lot of money that's gone into the NHS in the big settlement in the spending review earlier this month. If there's more money for the doctors, it comes from the NHS. And ultimately, the conversations they'll have to have with doctors' leaders is, where do you want it to come from? Because if we're going to pay you more, then there's something that we can't do. And it's that kind of honesty that they're going to have. Gets all the more difficult given that the language has ratcheted to the point where it has.
Tell us your thoughts on NHS Trust budgeting nearly £2 million for events including International Pronouns Day and talks on embracing your Afro hair. I don't think either of us are perhaps going to be going to that. And breaking the rainbow ceiling.
Yeah, I think it's actually a bit of a slap in the face, isn't it? I mean, it's very alarming to read that. I mean, I'm sure that it happened, whether it happened to the extent it did. I saw the Times reporting of it. I'm sure the truth lies somewhere in between, but there's no question that these events do happen. I think the public will be rather annoyed, actually, to hear that they've had all these appointments cancelled over the last 5 days, that they're paying even more tax than ever before, including a tax rise on businesses in the budget in the spring, and that money is being spent on some of these sideshows when actually should be focusing on patient care. And then it takes back to the point that we made, didn't it, is that ultimately, if you want to end the strikes, you're going to have to talk talk turkey with the doctors. You talk turkey, then money's got to come from somewhere, and we shouldn't be wasting it on sideshows.
Your podcast is Prevention is the New Cure, and I know you are really passionate and care an awful lot about your former brief in health. That's something that you really have taken on and have a lot of very developed and intriguing thoughts about. I just wonder, in regard to the amount of money the health service gets, it's now gone up to £200 billion for NHS England alone, to say nothing of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. I just wonder, at what point do we get efficiencies, do you think? At what point do we start saying, actually, hold on a second, the answer is not more money? Because it's in a sense, it's easy for governments to say, yes, we'll give more money. Obviously, the money doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from the taxpayer or borrowing or growth or whatever. But the point, I suppose, is that at what stage do you start having those really difficult conversations with the NHS and start saying, actually, it's not just about all these angels and heroes and marvellous people who got us through COVID, it's actually about the fact that efficiencies need to be made?
Well, 205 billion actually.
Okay.
So you underclubbed by 5 billion, to use the term of the week.
5 billion here, 5 billion there. Sooner or later, it all adds up to real money.
As Ronald Reagan used to say. That point is really coming because the rubber hits the road, doesn't it, when you have to have a talk about pay to try and end the strikes. But I mean, I come from it from the other angle. It's very kind what you said about the podcast is, Sarah Wollaston and I, what we try to do on the podcast, what I try to do in government is make the case that the conservative case for health reform, if you like, is to bend the curve. It's to bend the demand curve of the patients, customers, clients coming into the service. And the only way I know to do that is basically to get upstream and stop people falling in the first place. And we're spending 10 to 12 billion pounds a year on type 2 diabetes care in this country. We should get much more serious about preventing type 2 diabetes before it hits. And you could read that across the board. We're waiting for a cancer plan later this year. So bend the demand curve, and I think there's a conservative answer actually to healthcare reform. But also, you mentioned the word productivity. Well, I mean, look, when you give a 29% pay raise over 3 years without any strings attached, without any productivity demands built in, even if we got back to pre-COVID levels of productivity, as the former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt used to say, then, we would make quite significant productivity gains. And that would then, of course, allow the money that we spend on the NHS taxpayer money to go even further. But as things stand, Wes Streeting is right. I agree with him on this, is that we are heading for a health service with a country attached to it. That's bad economically. It's bad socially, because then it impacts on people being in the workforce because they're waiting for procedures and waiting for operations. And ultimately, that's then bad for the individual who's having their life chances curtailed by illness and sickness.
Steve, thank you. That is Steve Brown there, the former Conservative Health Minister. He's also host of the Prevention is the New Cure podcast. Do check that out. Dave in South Gloucester, quite a long message, but I think it's a good one. He says, Starmer, apart from appeasing the Muslim vote he relies on, sees getting involved in this as emulating Blair, who was involved in surrendering to the IRA, who were on the point of collapse. Hamas is almost destroyed, but Starmer wants to capitulate to them, give them credibility as Blair did with the IRA, as apart from making his Muslim support happy at will in his mind, making him some sort of international statesman. We all know he is an appalling and incompetent negotiator who has imposed almost no conditions on Hamas and is trying to threaten Israel, who will take no notice of him. They have been threatened by far scarier people than him and have faced them down. He thinks that doing what he is doing will improve his popularity, says Dave, here, despite his allowing the country and native population to continue to go to hell in a handcart. I think he has a shock awaiting him. Very interesting thoughts there, Dave. Thank you for those. Thanks also to Jason in Romford, who says, hi Peter, great show. I hope Trump imposes severe tariffs on the UK for rewarding and recognising the terrorists of Hamas. Tariffs would surely increase inflation, causing the UK to likely default on its index-linked debts. This would bring the government down, forcing a general election. Come on, Trump. The UK will support a little financial pain for such a gain. Jason, I do not want that to happen, mate. I can see your logic. I can see why you want that to happen. I definitely don't want that to happen. I don't think the pain would be worth it, quite frankly. I think there's got to be other ways. Stephen Millings in Belfast says, if Thatcher had stated she was going to recognise the IRA, do you think she would have survived the day in office, and what kind of message would that have given, says Stephen, talking about, of course, Margaret Thatcher faced down the IRA on many, many occasions, including when they tried to kill her in 1984 in Brighton. Brighton. Brilliant book written about that, actually called Killing Thatcher, which is written by Rory Carroll, who is a great author and a great man. Trevor says Starmer is quick to offer peacekeeping troops to monitor a Ukraine ceasefire. He doesn't seem so keen to send them to Gaza, where he thinks a ceasefire is urgently required. I'm sure the Israelis would welcome British troops to keep Hamas under control, says Trevor. I do not want British troops to go to the Middle East. Trevor, let me tell you, we support Israel in some ways. We sell them weapons. It's a complex issue. We're going to continue to debate that, and we're going to find out in just a second what's in the Sun tomorrow. Plenty of interesting stories. Will Barker is the deputy head of news at the paper. He'll be with us in just a second. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's have a look inside the Sun. Tomorrow, Will Barker is the deputy head of news at the paper. Will, great to have you in the studio. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. Yeah, well, it's been a busy afternoon, I tell you.
Certainly has. I don't know about you, but around between 4 and 4:30, and we had two major breaking stories. You're covering them both, of course, in the paper tomorrow. The big story, of course, is about UK airports grounded due to the radar failure.
Yeah, well, about 4:30, we started getting reports that from people stuck on tarmac in planes, trying to get off on their holidays across the country, and their air traffic control then fessed up that their radar system had gone down again, and affecting. I mean, we're still trying to work out the numbers on it, but we're thinking hundreds of flights.
It must be.
Affected.
It must
be.
Yeah.
I mean, we reckon there were about 3,000 departures today, and that's about 500,000 people.
There are three. We had a travel expert on earlier. I don't just have this at my fingertips. 3,080 flights today, and 570,000 passengers over the course of the whole day.
Yeah.
So if you affect presumably half of them, 4:30 onwards, even by 20 minutes, because it's not the small airports that matter; it's the big ones. Obviously, Heathrow, they want flights taken off every 2 minutes. Yeah.
So there's that backlog is going to cause a nightmare for all these people. I mean, I'm going on Saturday, so I hope they fix it by then, really. So and it's the latest in a long litany of failures at this place. I mean, we had the fire in March, the Hayes fire. We had 2023. There was the cock up with the guy who was working from home. I don't even remember that one. The planes went down for like a couple of days because they sent the wrong email.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
I've just been looking into the past of Swanwick, and there's just been dozens of these.
Not exactly great. We know as well that Birmingham Airport, which is one of the airports that was affected, there are lots of people saying that it should be renamed Ozzy Osbourne Airport. There is obviously George Best, Belfast City Airport. There's Robin Hood, Nottingham Airport. There's John Lennon, Liverpool Airport. But of course, you have extensive reporting from Ozzy Osbourne's funeral today.
We've got two spreads of it tomorrow. We've had our reporter Ed Southgate out there. I was chatting with Jeremy last week and trying to work out, we didn't know at this stage, would Birmingham be included because I'm a Brummie, and for us, Aussie's kind of like royalty, really. And sure enough, they came out in their thousands, lined the streets this afternoon, and very touching scenes when the cortege pulled up on Broad Street, and Sharon came out, and all the family were there, dropped the pink roses, and everybody was affected.
Why pink roses?
I don't know, to be honest. Good question.
It's just something that's
a single
important.
pink rose.
Right, okay. Maybe there's a Black Sabbath link in some way.
Yeah.
Great stuff. We'll read all about that in The Sun tomorrow. We also got the news around 4 o'clock about Mohammed Fahir Amaz, who was arrested at Terminal 2 at Manchester Airport on the 23rd of July. Almost exactly a year later, he's now been convicted. But of course, there may be a retrial of his brother, so this is sort of slightly complicated.
It is very complicated. I've just been talking to the lawyer about it. The judge has asked that there's sort of no background be discussed on it, and this caused a huge furore back in July, where I think a lot of people sort of got the wrong end of the stick on the story, caused all sorts of problems. But the police, the chief constable's come out today and said that now he's glad that some proper scrutiny has been given to at least part of the case, and this guy has been found guilty of two of the assaults on two female police officers. They released the video of them, and they were left in a terrible state.
Yeah, one of them had her nose broken as well. Really a very, very serious story, and I'm sure you'll write what you can tomorrow. But as is always the case, there's always more to come when the full story can be told, and legally there are all sorts of issues around this as well. Perhaps we need a little smile.
We
on
really
our
do
face.
need some light today, don't we?
We do, and what's not nice is that someone overfed a hamster called Angel Delight. But what is nice is that Angel Delight, the obese hamster, is now getting some proper training on the wheel. It's going to get back to a reasonable size and live a good life. Tell us about this story.
Well, I think we'll probably all be going dieting after a sort of big summer holidays, but this hamster started early, and very sad story that the previous owner, I think, got a bit mistaken, thought they'd bought a gerbil and started feeding it like a gerbil. And it sort of plumped up, and in the end realised that they'd something gone awry. So handed over to this Blue Cross in Sheffield, who are now caring for Angel Delight.
And it's a great name. It is a great name for a hamster.
It's brilliant.
You can't argue with that.
And apparently it's the size of a potato. It's and it's huge, and so they've now got it on
74 grams. That's quite a potato. I know my potatoes.
Yeah. And apparently that's double what it should be. There's like double the size. We're calling it maybe the world's biggest hamster. And
maybe not. Let's just call it that anyway.
Exactly. And it's going to have a bigger hamster wheel, because they're putting on a strict diet and massive exercise regime.
So my best intro ever when I was a newspaper reporter was when I was 19 years old. I was on my gap year and working for the Cape Argus in Cape Town, afternoon newspaper, and a guy rang up to say his donkey had gone missing. And on a mountain, donkey had gone missing, and what had happened was it happened on a public holiday. Lots of public holidays in South Africa, and this was the public holiday that is the anniversary of the first free and fair elections. It was the 9th anniversary of the 1994 first free and fair elections. So my intro was, for Barry Godwin's donkey Greedy Guts, Freedom Day yesterday was taken just a little too literally. Would that make it into The Sun?
Yeah, might be. Yeah, could do.
I'm quite proud of that intro. So we'll read all about Angel Delight tomorrow. That will be the icing on the cake of a packed Sun newspaper tomorrow. Will, thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
Will Barker is the Deputy Head of News at The Sun. And thanks to Dawn in Chelmsford, who says, "Hi Peter, I think we should abandon flying and go back to sailing ships. Imagine a lovely 4-masted ship, the Edward Miliband perhaps. It would certainly keep our net zero targets," says Dawn. No doubt there would be some complaints from him anyway. But listen, thank you so much to Dawn for that. Plenty more of your comments coming up after the break. We will also, finally, I promised you this would happen, and we will talk about why barking dogs are involved in a £25,000 court case. Stay with us.
the Pacific tectonic plate, which is a huge, dense piece of rock, which is being forced underneath the continental plate, the Asian continental plate, at 3 inches a year. Now, that might not sound very much, but with the mass that's being pushed there and the build-up of tension means that in this region, this part of the Pacific Rim of Fire where this happens, you get build-up of incredible tensions and you get a sudden release.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right then, as promised, we've been distracted in many different directions today. We've had the Manchester Airport conviction. We've had the fact that radar went down in this country for 20 minutes. We've had all sorts of different changes to the running order. I love it. I love breaking news, and I love it when the running order is not the same at the start of the programme as it is at the end of the programme. Breaking news is what I was put on this earth to do. But what happened was that earlier on we were meant to do this story, and Wendy Gregory is with us. She's a psychologist. Wendy, thank you so much for your patience, and I hope you find something profitable and useful to do with the last couple of hours, because as promised we are now going to talk to Wendy about the city boss suing neighbours for £25,000 over noisy dogs. This is a senior city executive suing his neighbours. Filippo Alotte, who heads a team of investment management at Federated Hermes, never heard of it, says his family has been forced away on holidays and over weekends to get away from 2 German Shepherd dogs living next to their home in Streatham in London. He alleges the animals kept by his neighbours, Mohammed and Saima Udin, bark loudly and excessively, causing distress to his 3 children and disrupting their education. He counted no fewer, sorry, I shouldn't laugh, it's not very pleasant, but he counted no fewer than 74 individual barks from the dogs over a 24-hour period. That can't be nice. And he began to record the disturbances in a barking diary he has kept since 2021. Now he's gone to the High Court and is suing the owners for £25,000 in damages. This is not pleasant. This is not a nice thing when you have neighbours who make too much noise, or indeed their dogs make too much noise. What do you make of this story, Wendy?
Well, it doesn't particularly surprise me. I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, Peter. I've not had the same kind of problem with dogs, but many years ago, I unfortunately had squatters move in next door to me, and they played music all night, any time, started any time. So I think obviously the neighbours need to be more responsible about their dogs, and okay, they're guard dogs, but they shouldn't be barking all the time. They should only be barking when there's cause for alarm. But I totally understand how it could drive you completely insane. It's an invasion of your peace. It's an invasion, really, of your home to have that kind of noise. And I think with dogs, we can zone other kinds of noises out. So you might live on a busy road, but you stop noticing the traffic noise. Yeah. You might live on the flight path, but you zone out the aeroplane noise. I think because dogs, it's quite a different noise, and it's very sporadic, and you don't know when it's going to come. So you might have half an hour of peace, and then suddenly, rah, rah, rah.
Yeah. Well, it's the worrying. I mean, I certainly didn't have barking dogs, but I had neighbours through my wall. I live in a flat, and through the wall, it seems to be quite a sort of not particularly soundproof wall, and I heard them arguing. And I know that they were in bed. It was nighttime usually. They'd be sitting in bed and arguing. And what I know is that because I was in their flat once and they showed me, was that their sort of headboard was right to the wall, and then my headboard right to the wall as well. So we're as close to each other as you can be whilst living in separate dwellings, I suppose. And they argued an awful lot. They argued at 2 o'clock in the morning. They later moved out, and it wasn't great. to be honest. And actually, when I was going to bed at 11 o'clock at night or whatever, I was sort of thinking, oh, are they going to wake me up at 2 o'clock in the morning doing this? So I can sympathise, and I'm sure many of our viewers and listeners can as well. And if you've experiences like this, let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. So it's the anticipation of some of this as well that does have a psychological effect, Wendy.
It is, because you're actually in a state of high alert or hypervigilance, because you're, waiting for this to happen. A little bit like a soldier in a war zone, waiting for something to kick off. There is some evidence that suggests that we are actually biologically predisposed, or our brains are hardwired to be alert to the sound of dogs. It's a little bit like a baby crying. It signals that there's something wrong, either there's something wrong with the animal, or that we're in danger, because dogs don't bark for no reason and they can attack. So it would make sense that we're hardwired to be alert to that kind of sound.
The legal action asserts that the noise generated by the two dogs exceeds the World Health Organization guidelines for residential sound levels. Advice from the Dogs Trust, which is of course the charity that specialises in canine welfare, has previously issued guidance on what to do if your dog is barking too much. It includes keeping your dog active and avoiding telling them off, as it can make them anxious. Now, the complainant in this alleges that the impact has been significant. His wife has been forced to abandon her home-based clothing business, and their 11, 15 and 16-year-old children are becoming so afraid of the dogs that they struggle to focus on their homework. Does that, I'm not asking you about this case specifically, but do those kind of allegations stack up, Wendy, in your experience as a psychologist?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, from personal experience, the neighbours I referred to earlier, I used to go and stay to friends every weekend because, I just couldn't cope with it anymore. And of course, disturbed sleep leads to all kinds of problems. It can lead to anxiety, it can lead to depression, it can affect your blood pressure, your health generally. So yeah, that does stack up. It makes a lot of sense. You just want some peace. You just want some peace. And the ultimate solution is to move, but why should you have to do that, really?
There is a brilliant story about a woman who worked in the BBC in the Westminster Bureau, and Jerry Adams was there about 20 years ago, being extremely loud and talking and on a phone call and being very loud, and she just went up to him and said, "Jerry, can you please just give us a bit of peace?"
There's more than one meaning to that.
Well, indeed. Wendy, thank you very much indeed for your contribution. Apologies to change things, but of course we had all that breaking news earlier today. The implications of both of those things will go on, I would imagine, for quite some time. That is Wendy Gregory, a psychologist, joining us there. Dan in Kent says, on average, dogs bark 362 times a day. Obviously, this is a rough estimate. Dan, I hate puns. I really don't like wordplay of any type, and I just find puns as the lowest form of wit, really. So if you could avoid that in future, I'd be very grateful. I'm joking. I love puns. That was a great pun. Thank you, Dan. Very good pun. In fact, there was a 6-year-old who was staying with me with her mother over the past few days, and they sent me a lovely little card which said "thank you," and it had a little sheep on it, EWE, and I was trying to teach and indeed indoctrinate the 6-year-old about puns and how they are the greatest form of wordplay. On a more serious note, Gary has been in touch and says, "Peter, I can see what happened in Afghanistan being played out in Gaza. The West will eventually send troops in to rid the area of Hamas. We will rebuild infrastructure, train a local defence force to keep Hamas out. We will throw tens of billions of dollars at the problem, and then as soon as we leave, Hamas will return. That local defence force will fold like a cheap deck chair, and we will be back to square one, except that Hamas will then be in control of all the sophisticated weapons we left behind for that local defence force to use." Well, Gary, I don't think there's any suggestion we're going to send ground troops in, certainly, or to take control of that ourselves as the UK or indeed NATO or the West or whatever, but certainly that has been the pattern of what has happened in Afghanistan. And indeed, I am still in touch with a very, very nice guy who's having a really rough time. He's a translator. He translated for the British, for the Americans. He's a hero as far as I'm concerned, and he's still there. Let's talk to Darryl in Lincoln. Darryl, you've been giving us a ring on 0344 499 1000. You're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Sure.
Great show, by the way, Peter.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say that we don't seem to ever learn anything from history. And when you look back at the history of Israel, the original Israelites, the Jews, were there before 1200 BC. So that was originally and has always been their country. And the Palestinians, or the Philistines as they were known back then, they didn't arrive to that area until the 7th century, which is almost 2,000 years later. So, you know, and what worries me is that the UK, I mean, we have got a growing Muslim community in the UK, which I'm very welcoming with that, you know, and I don't have a problem with that. But you do kind of look at the history books, because whenever the Palestinians settled in Israel, there's always been conflict and problems, because they've always wanted more and more.
I certainly want everybody in the Middle East to live in peace. I'm not sure that it's going to be solved in the next few months or years or whatever. But what I do know, well, I wonder, Darrell, what you think about the recognition of a Palestinian state. Will that help in any way?
Well, I just think it's a sticking plaster to like a broken leg. You know, it's because they're not just going to want a state. They're going to want that whole area where the Abraham Mosque is as theirs exclusively, with exclusive rights to it. And there's a Jewish synagogue adjacent to that, and it's supposed to be a shared site. But the Muslims don't want the Jews there, as much as the Jews don't want the Muslims there. And it's always been a hotbed of problems, right back through history, when the Palestinians first arrived in the late 600s, and claimed some of that area as theirs, and it wasn't their area to claim. You know, they're the new guys on the block in that area. They always have been, as far as the original Jews were concerned. And to be quite honest, you can't argue with that, because the Jews have fought everybody for that area for an awful long time, you know, including the Romans, you know. And so, you know, it's very unfair for the world to side with Palestine against Israel, no matter what you're saying. I mean, I'm actually a Muslim by faith. You know, that is my religion, but I still don't think it's right. And I do worry that in this country we've got such a large influx of Muslims now that are taking over areas, and you do kind of like look at that and think.
Can I just ask you about your personal situation, Darrell? Have you always been a Muslim, or were you a convert?
No, I was a convert. I married a Muslim lady from Morocco, so I became Muslim, and I do really like the religion a lot, you know. And if you stick to the religion and what it actually says in the Quran, then it is a very peaceful religion, and it's a good religion, and I believe in it strongly.
Well, that's really interesting, Darrell. I mean, I agree with you. A lot of our viewers and listeners are quite sceptical about Islam as a faith.
Yeah.
I personally am not sceptical about Islam. I'm sceptical about Islamism, and I'm sceptical about Islamists, of which you're clearly not. I just wonder, as someone who converted to Islam, what you would say to people who say that it's not a religion of peace, and actually it encourages anti-Semitism and encourages people to go into a way of life and to accept a way of life that's anti-British in some ways. I mean, we have a lot of viewers and listeners who think that. What would you say to them, Darrell?
Well, I would say if you go to a mosque or go to an Islamic country and see how traditional, proper Muslims go about their daily lives, it's a very good way of living. I mean, I've lived in Saudi Arabia and I've lived in Morocco, and you know, and I've gone to mosques and I've met lots and lots of lovely people. You couldn't meet nicer people, and you know, it's a great religion with a lot of great people behind that religion. But when you look at terrorist groups like Hamas and you know the South Yemen terrorists, the
Houthis,
the Houthi rebels, I just can't get behind any of that. I'm totally against it, because that is nothing to do with Islam and Muslim religion. It's going against everything in the Quran, and I don't think the Palestinians in Israel, I don't think they've got a right to want more than what Israel should let them have. And I mean, I've heard the arguments from Muslims in that area where they've said that they're mistreated by the Israelis, and they won't let them have proper access to the Abraham Mosque and so on and so forth. And I do get that, but terrorism is not the answer to that.
Well, terrorism is definitely not the answer. Daryl, fascinating to talk to you. I'm sorry to cut this off, but really, really interesting conversation. I just want to fit in Jill in Cornwall before Kevin O'Sullivan. Jill, you're very welcome to the programme. Sorry to keep you waiting there. I was really interested in what Daryl said. What's your perspective on this Palestinian issue, do you think?
Well, I can understand how Daryl feels, and I understand how he is, supporting the Muslim community that he is aware of. But for me, I'm sorry, I just feel that the Muslim community in and around Palestine is not the type of community that I would like to support statewide. And I'm horrified that Keir Starmer has done this, because it commits us, it commits us possibly to have to support aspects of it. And I don't know that I agree with a lot of what's happening out there.
I think a lot of people are in the same boat in regard to this, Jill, who believe the same thing. They want peace. They want there to be peace in the Middle East. But I don't understand how recognising a Palestinian state helps anybody in the humanitarian problems in Gaza.
Well, it doesn't. And my concern is that, we've been giving money, we've been supporting them, or there have been aspects of this country that have supported them. We've been donating money and goodness knows what, and food and goodness knows what. And what I would like to know is, what are the areas that surround this particular area of Hamas and what have you? Why aren't they contributing? Why aren't they supporting? Why aren't they helping to sort of feed the people of,
of the Gaza Strip? Well, certainly, Egypt, I think there's a lot more we can ask of Egypt. Certainly, Israel controls the borders, but Egypt has a border with the Gaza Strip, and that's something we need to look into and mention a lot more. Jill, thank you so much for your call. No doubt we'll speak on a future occasion. Kevin O'Sullivan is with us. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Peter.
Hi.
We're going to kick off with a left field story. And it's a very sad story. We want to ask why 11 Army veterans who were living in a housing association flats in Bolton are basically being kicked out on the streets. They're being evicted. It's a sort of bureaucratic wrangle over who pays their subsidised